The tournament between the academies raged on, and to everyone's surprise, the Holy Academy defeated Eternum's Royal Academy. What made it even more unexpected was that none of the academies had sent their top-ranked students or notable figures. Still, I had to admit, the talent on display was exceptional. Each academy showcased students far beyond the average level for their age. Compared to them, Silverleaf Academy had maybe 3 or 4 students who could match up. But that was enough for me. We didn't need to be the strongest. We just needed to be clever enough to win. The next battle between Beastkin Academy and Sword Academy was completely one-sided. Beastkin Academy wiped the floor with them, 5 victories, 0 losses. Then came time for the next round. Just like before, we drew lots to determine our match order. I was the last to pull a scroll. Ella got number 3. The huge tiger from Beastkin Academy drew 2. Sword Academy's leader picked 1. The Saintess also had 2.
And me? Number 1.
Tough luck, I muttered, casually stretching before heading back to our group. My classmates stared at me, a mix of nerves and anticipation in their eyes. Vivian caught my gaze and gave a subtle nod.
Don't worry, guys.
I've got a little plan, I said with a deepening smile. Our academy's strength wasn't in brute force. Each student specialized in one element or skill, and I intended to turn that into our advantage. Sword Academy, on the other hand, trained exclusively in swordsmanship. That meant close-range fighters. What we needed was someone who could keep their distance and counter with precision.
A wind user.
Students into the arena. The announcer's voice rang out, snapping us into focus. My eyes drifted toward Sword Academy's station as one of their students stepped forward.
I turned to Maria. You're up.
Stick to the plan, and you'll be fine. She nodded confidently, her green hair swaying as she walked toward the battlefield. Maria was one of our strongest wind users. I trusted her completely. We only needed 4 wins. I'd make sure we got the 5th. With both students in place, the announcer's voice echoed again. Let the match begin.
Swish.
The swordsman charged immediately, blade slicing toward Maria. Fast, yes, but not fast enough.
Whoop.
Maria danced back with the help of her wind magic, gracefully dodging the strike.
Clang.
His sword struck where she'd been standing just seconds before, sparks flying from the impact. He pursued her with relentless aggression, but Maria glided away each time with a breeze at her back.
Clang. Clink. Whoop.
Each swing of his blade was heavier, more desperate. Then came the opening we'd been waiting for. The swordsman overextended, lunging with too much force. Maria sidestepped midair with a gust of wind and soared upward.
He stumbled.
Maria raised her hands. Shhhhhrrrrrr. A strong gust tore through the arena, dust swirling as the swordsman struggled to stand his ground.
Swoop.
The force became overwhelming.
Then. BAM.
The final gust knocked him off balance, sending him sliding backward, straight out of the ring.
Thud.
The crowd erupted. The winner is Maria of Silverleaf Academy. She returned with a proud smile. Great job, I said, smiling back. She had followed the plan perfectly. I won that easily, she declared, lifting her chin. The confidence suited her. I laughed. Maria usually lacked self-assurance. Hopefully this win changed that. Next, the announcer called the second match. Unfortunately, our opponent was too strong. One of my classmates volunteered, but was quickly overwhelmed and defeated.
A pity.
Then I saw our next matchup.
My lips curled. Derek. He turned, eyes wide. It's your time to shine, I said.
His face lit up, and he hurried toward the arena waving.
The match began. Ding.
The swordsman dashed, sword swinging.
Boom.
An earth wall erupted from the ground, blocking the strike.
The arena filled with dust. Clang. Thud.
The opponent hacked at the wall while Derek stood calmly, then stomped. Crack. The ground beneath the swordsman trembled and shifted. Derek launched a wave of jagged stones.
Rumble.
The swordsman leapt to dodge, just as Derek slammed the ground again.
Boom.
A pillar of earth shot upward, knocking the swordsman into the air and off the stage.
Cheers followed.
The winner is Derek of Silverleaf Academy.
2 wins, I said, high-fiving him.
Like Maria, he boasted, kids these days. My grin didn't leave. But then came disaster. We lost the next 3 matches. Now it was 4-2. 1 more point and we'd be eliminated. I had to send our best. I turned toward Mia, our top fire mage. She stepped forward, eyes fierce, her crimson hair tied in a high ponytail. Her staff burned with fire, glinting beneath the sun.
Her opponent, a swordswoman.
The announcer called out.
Begin. Ding. The swordswoman charged. Clang.
Sparks flew as steel met flaming staff.
Whoosh.
Flames flared as Mia pushed back, forcing the swordswoman to retreat.
Swish. Clang. Fwoom. The clash intensified.
Fire danced around Mia like a living creature. Sweat dripped from her opponent's brow.
Now. Mia moved in. Whoosh. Boom.
A fireburst sent the swordswoman flying backward, staggering. Then, Mia spun her staff and slammed it to the ground.
Crackle.
A wave of flame surged. The swordswoman stumbled, disoriented. One last fire blast.
Boom. Thud.
She hit the ground outside the ring. The winner is Mia of Silverleaf Academy. Mia returned, staff still glowing. 3 down, she said, twirling it.
Good job. Anything for you, she winked. I chuckled.
She had a thing for me, that was clear.
I didn't mind.
Let's just say, the attraction was mutual in certain gravitational ways. Anyway, one more win to go. I glanced across and saw a lean swordsman with a rapier. Perfect for James, Derek's brother, and another Earth user.
The match started fast. Swish. Rumble.
Stone walls clashed against speed. James grinned as the swordsman danced around his attacks.
Clang.
The rapier bounced off James' rock armor.
My turn. Boom.
A pillar launched the swordsman skyward.
Whoosh.
James hurled a boulder with pinpoint accuracy. Crack. The swordsman tumbled out of the arena. The winner is James of Silverleaf Academy. James walked back with a proud smirk.
4-4, Vivian whispered.
Everyone looked at me.
I laughed. Relax.
I'll handle the rest.
I stepped forward.
The wind greeted me as I entered the arena. Across from me stood the Sword Academy's leader, calm and cold.
Shing. He drew his sword.
The crowd roared. Silverleaf's leader is entering. Finally, we get to see him fight. The announcer's voice thundered. The final match between leaders begins.
Swoop. Swoop.
In an instant, Leon, leader of the Sword Academy, vanished from his spot, reappearing mid-stride with a flash of steel. His sword gleamed as it raced toward Estria in a precise, deadly thrust. But Estria moved like moonlight itself, graceful, effortless. A subtle sidestep to the right, then a vertical arc of his blade aimed at Leon's back.
Clang.
Sparks burst into the air as Leon barely managed to twist and parry the strike. His teeth clenched, muscles straining, yet Estria remained calm, a faint smile curling on his lips as a silvery glow began to pulse from his sword.
And then, boom.
Estria slammed his sword down, cracking the fortified arena floor open. A shallow crater formed beneath his blade. The crowd gasped, then roared. Not once in the tournament had the arena itself been damaged, until now. Leon's expression twisted.
Damn it.
A red aura surged up from his body, enveloping his sword and limbs with a wild, crackling energy.
In a blink, he disappeared. Clang.
Leon reappeared behind Estria, blade arcing toward his head. But without even turning, Estria lifted his sword behind his back, catching the blow perfectly.
Impossible. Leon choked.
With a flick of his wrist, Estria deflected the strike, causing Leon to stumble forward. Seizing the opportunity, Estria's foot slammed into his gut.
Thud. Kook.
Leon skidded backward, clutching his stomach. Blood dripped from his lips, but he wiped it away and raised his sword.
Sword circle, first move.
Revolving swords. Swords materialized around Leon, hovering in the air before launching at Estria like a storm of steel. Estria didn't even blink.
He dashed forward. Tap.
He jumped onto one of the flying swords midair, and with a burst of mana.
Boom.
The rest were blasted away like leaves in a hurricane. As he soared through the air, his blade carved a crescent-shaped mana slash toward Leon.
Zoom.
Leon dodged, only to realize too late.
Estria was gone. Thud.
A heavy strike landed from behind, sending Leon sprawling. You're holding back, Estria's voice echoed lazily.
Come on.
Use your unique talent. This is boring.
Leon trembled. His pride burned.
Is that so? His voice dropped an octave. Let's see if you're still smiling after this. The ground shook.
The air twisted.
1,000 swords materialized, far more than before, and without even using the sword circle techniques. The talent Sword Immortal has been activated.
Go.
The sword surged toward Estria in a blinding wave of steel. Still smiling, Estria stood still. The temperature dropped. His stance shifted. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art. First move, Ice Lotus Bloom. An elegant lotus of glowing moonlight and glistening frost bloomed around him, each petal a shield of beauty and death. Clang! Clang! The petals met the flying swords, deflecting and breaking them one after the other. In the stands, the nobles were stunned. This is a self-made sword art, Evelyn whispered. Comparable to an A-rank, Elander muttered, his tone sour. After all, Leon was his grandson. Empress Isabella nodded. It's not just his swordsmanship. Every move draws the opponent into his rhythm. Like a puppet master. Even Emperor Francis, ever indifferent, was watching with undisguised interest. If only he were my son-in-law, Isabella said, lips curling into a sly smile. But then, BKM. Leon was launched across the arena, dragging his sword to keep from falling off the edge. His uniform was shredded, skin bloodied, yet he refused to fall. That was a swordsman's pride. But Estria? Unscathed. Untouched. He walked forward. Shameful, he said. You didn't land a single blow. Even with your talent. Truly disappointing. You. Leon's voice cracked. You bastard. A storm erupted. Fiery red energy exploded skyward, reaching the clouds. The audience gasped. Crimson lightning crackled, converging into a titanic, glowing red sword high above. Leon's eyes gleamed with madness as he raised a hand, and dropped it. Die! The sword began its descent. Estria! Someone screamed from the crowd. But Estria? He raised a casual thumbs up. I've got this. His stance shifted again, legs forward, back arched. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art. 30% strength, third move, Moonlight's one flash. Shing. A flash of light carved through the air, pure and blinding. In an instant, the crimson sword shattered into fragments, raining like blood-red snow across the arena. Crack! Leon dropped to his knees. Blood dripped from his brow. His body trembled. Step! Step! Estria approached. His crimson eyes gleamed like a predator eyeing its prey. WW, what kind of monster A are you? Leon stammered. Estria tilted his head, smile never fading. Just a moonlight lover. Then, he placed his palm on Leon's chest. Impacto. Zoom. Arg. Leon's body was launched like a cannonball. Crash. He smashed into the protective barrier, his sword clattering uselessly. The winner is Silverleaf Academy's leader, Aestria. Boom. The crowd exploded. He's unreal. He's a monster. Estria. Cheers and chants shook the arena. Estria walked away with a small, satisfied smile. That was insane. You destroyed him. His classmates swarmed around him, each offering praise. Vivian smiled proudly, until... Brother Estria, Mia purred, pressing herself against him, eyes sparkling. Ahem. Vivian's voice cracked like a whip. Give him space. He needs to rest. Everyone instantly backed off, whistling innocently. Estria chuckled. Then, the winner of this round, and the match, Silverleaf Academy. Oohoo. Estria stepped back into the arena one final time, holding the Silverleaf flag. Alone, he raised it high. The crowd fell silent for just a moment, awestruck. Students from Silverleaf wept in the stands. Estria raised the flag for them. To show them the truth. The strongest student of the weakest academy was an absolute monster.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
What did I just witness? I mumbled to myself, still staring at the arena. Leon, the so-called leader of the Sword Academy, was completely obliterated. He didn't stand a chance. Not even for a single moment. Honestly, if I compared myself to Leon, I'd have a 70% chance of winning, but just from the looks of it, Estria knew he was going to win since the beginning of the match. It looked like the kind of arrogance of an experienced hunter. Beside me, Ella tugged at my sleeve, her eyes wide in disbelief upon witnessing Estria's fight. Lucas, did you see that last move? Ella asked me with a shaky voice. I nodded at her words. Yeah, he used the density of his mana to create an air suppression explosion, resulting in a massive impact that sent Leon flying. Rose, hearing our words, took a step forward before opening her mouth. His mana level is still lower than mine though.
What?
I turned my head towards her as my eyes widened in shock. Rose crossed her arms and spoke with her usual sharp tone. His mana level should be around the B rank, but somehow, its power reached the A rank or even higher than that during that single moment, she explained. It's weird. His density was very strong, but his mana capacity, it's loose. The flow of his mana veins is all messed up, to the point of his right arm's mana veins still being in recovery. Rose spoke, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Estria, who was waving his academy's flag at the crowd. And not just only that. Maya suddenly appeared, practically bouncing on her toes to grab our attention. His physical capabilities are much stronger than mine. Besides, he didn't even manifest his sword aura, he only relied on mana.
Right.
I almost forgot about that. He didn't use aura at all. Estria's supposed to be a magic swordsman, the kind that combines both aura and mana, but this entire fight, there wasn't a trace of aura from him. With his strength, he should be able to use aura. So why didn't he? I pondered over and over again, but couldn't figure out the reason.
Ah, right.
Ella said suddenly, breaking the silence. I saw Estria use his aura once, when he saved me. Her words caught all of our attention, even Iris, who had been unusually quiet until now. Ella placed a hand on the hilt of her sword, her expression thoughtful. His aura is terrific. While his mana is a silver color, his aura is a deep violet color. She then looked at her sword. My sword started trembling as he used his sword to cut down that monster. It was in a single swing of his sword, and the monster was cleanly split into two.
A violet color?
Iris muttered, and suddenly, her eyes parted slightly. Normally, a swordsman's aura manifests in a color that represents one's tendency, and violet represents luxury and power. Rose finished her words, looking over at her fire staff before gripping it slightly. No one ever recorded had a violet color aura. No one has ever been able to embody power as their defining trait. So, it means that Estria. That freaking monster. Ella muttered, however, her eyes seemed to shine even more than before. It was as if she had a new goal or she was proud of something. Even I was shocked. Luxury and power were one of the 7 strongest tendencies. And no one could ever get the violet color that represents them as their aura.
Aura wasn't like mana.
It was a reflection of a person's very essence, and the color represented their core tendencies. While there were thousands of aura colors, only 7 stood at the peak, representing the purest, most dominant aspects of the human spirit. Violet was one of them. And Estria was the only swordsman who could use it.
Damn it.
I cursed under my breath, clenching my fists. How are we supposed to beat someone like that? But then I remembered.
The promise I made.
I swore I'd win this competition. And no matter how monstrous Estria is, I won't let our headmistress down.
Not now. Not ever.
All right, everyone. Vivian's voice rang out as she addressed us. We've got 2 points on the board and 3 matches left. If we can secure just one more win, we'll have enough to advance to the next round. Anyone could see that she was really happy with the result, even though she had a stern and resolute tone in her voice. The current score stands at 2 points for the Holy Academy, 1 point for the Eternum Royal Academy, 1 point for the Beastkin Academy, and finally. Vivian paused, glancing dramatically at her clipboard. 0 points for the Sword Academy. A faint chuckle rippled through our classmates at her last remark, but she continued on. So, like I said before, if we secure this match, we should have enough points to advance to the next round. We just need to be lucky enough, she declared confidently. She was telling the truth. We just needed to be lucky enough and it should be fine. For example, if we were up against the Beastkin Academy and managed to win, we'd have 3 points. If both the Holy Academy and the Eternum Royal Academy also won their matches, the standings would align in our favor. From there, all we'd need was for the Beastkin Academy to lose 1 more match, or for us to scrape out just 1 more win, and we'd advance for sure. So, we really just needed to be lucky enough. And now it was time to draw the lots again. Like before, each one of us picked up, except Leon who didn't come, and instead, a huge guy took his place. Ella's number was 1. Christina's number was 2. The huge tiger's number was 1. The huge guy's number was 2.
Ha, lucky. I grinned.
My number was 3, which meant another skip.
Woo.
The crowd erupted and started booing at us the moment they realized. We got the free win once again, but I didn't care. Luck is also a skill. So, I smiled at the crowd and walked back to my station.
Perfect.
That's great, our representatives can rest for a little bit more. He glanced toward the group who had fought in the last match: Derek, Mia, James, and Maria. I was technically part of that group too, but I didn't feel the need to rest. My fight against Leon was beyond easy difficulty. And the reason for that was that I found something special inside my body.
This body of mine, it was strange.
Not mystically or supernaturally, but in how absurdly powerful it was. My mana veins were utterly chaotic, completely messed up. And yet, because of that, the flow of mana in my body was 5 times faster than normal. It meant I could deploy mana at incredible speeds and absorb it just as quickly. However, controlling it was more difficult. But it wasn't much of a challenge since I was already used to it. The only question is, how come I didn't appear in the novel at all? Like I mentioned before, my nickname Moonlight Swordsman appeared, but it didn't reveal my true identity. It was strange. So, it must related to that prophetic dream.
I thought.
It was the only possibility. Even I couldn't defeat that huge amount of beasts, especially since their leader was a named beast. Even if I indeed used the combination of my aura and mana, it would be almost impossible to do it.
Unless? Nope.
I shook the thought from my mind. That's too reckless. I'd probably break every bone in my body attempting something that stupid. Anyway, I should simply watch and continue to analyze the representatives of each academy, even though we almost have a guaranteed pass to the next round. After an hour or so, the matches ended. To no one's surprise, both the Eternum Royal Academy and the Holy Academy won their respective matches, granting a point for each of them. With 2 matches remaining, the Beastkin Academy could make its comeback, but it was very unlikely. Even if we did lose against it, it wouldn't be a problem since we have 3 points. Because the Beastkin Academy would have a huge chance of losing either way if it met the Eternum Royal Academy or the Holy Academy. So yeah, the lots were drawn once again. And of course, the Silverleaf Academy was against the Beastkin Academy. Not to mention that the Holy Academy got a skip, and the Eternum Royal Academy easily won against the Sword Academy. Because of that, our match was declared as the possible last match of the first round of the Academy's competition. If Silverleaf Academy wins, the 3 academies are already chosen. However, if we lose, we will need to participate in another match to determine if we advance. After all, the current score is now: our Academy with 3 points, the Holy Academy with 4 points, the Eternum Royal Academy with 3 points, the Beastkin Academy with 1 point, and the Sword Academy with 0 points. If the Beastkin Academy did win against us, we would have another match, since it could still end up in a draw with our academy.
Ah, muscle-brained beasts.
These ones are going to be pretty annoying, I muttered to myself. And if that was just to confirm my thoughts, their first representative was the leader of the Beastkin Academy. That huge muscle-brained tiger. He was looking at me with a wide smirk, his eyes radiating a firm competitiveness. Out of all his matches, he had always won them even though his academy lost in the final part. So, in reality, the Beastkin Academy only lost because the other students' levels were simply too low compared to other academies. 2 attributes at A rank, of course: strength and vitality. My eyes glowed intensely as a balance scale symbol appeared on them.
Still,
a faint smile appeared on my lips. It won't be enough to defeat me. So, you're the Moonlight Swordsman, huh? As soon as I stepped into the center of the arena, the huge tiger murmured as he scrutinized me from head to toe, his piercing gaze landing on my eyes. He let out a small chuckle and extended a giant hand towards me. I'm Agner, it's a pleasure to meet you. My gaze briefly met his hand before switching to his eyes. With a small smile, I also extended my hand and shook his.
Clench. Ha!
At that moment, his lips curved into a wide smirk as his pupils enlarged, and then, a crushing force started smashing my hand.
But to his surprise,
muscle-brained animals are really easy to predict. I laughed before my expression turned cold. A faint layer of mana enveloped my entire hand, and then, it was my time to squeeze his hand back. Even with 2 A-rank attributes, strength and vitality, what good are they when your mana level is only D rank? Pure strength alone is one of the worst investments in a fight.
Hag.
A cry of pain reached my ears as his face contorted in pain, trying to shake my hand off his. What did you expect? I asked him as I increased my strength. Did you really think you could win against me with only pure strength? His face twisted in anger and a vein bulged on his forehead as he swung a massive fist at me. Immediately, I twisted my body, dodging his punch, and used his momentum against him. With a sharp pivot, I threw him over my shoulder.
Thud.
Agner's massive body slammed against the ground, dust and debris scattering on impact. Student Estria. The match hasn't begun yet. A loud voice reached us, and it was unmistakably the headmistress of the Eternum Royal Academy. She flew above the protective barrier on her magic broom, her long purple hair swaying in the wind, topped with her signature witch hat. Her name was Eleonora, and she was the current strongest mage as well as the headmistress of the Eternum Royal Academy. My information about her was very limited, but I knew that she could easily cast 9th level spells which could be considered calamity spells since they could potentially destroy an entire country alone. However, she never appeared in her academy, even to help fight against the demons, which was quite weird. All right. I held my hands up in the air, to which I received an even colder stare from her. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, but she kind of hates me. Well, Estria or I rejected to be her disciple over 3 times already, leaving her completely mad over that matter. Oomph. She scoffed before disappearing from my view. It was at that time that the announcer's voice finally rang out, breaking the silence of the arena, and officially starting our fight. Let the first round begin. Swoop. The moment the words left the announcer's mouth, Agner dashed toward me. His claws extended, glinting like steel, as he swung a powerful strike at my chest. I immediately brought out my sword, and parried his claws, creating faint sparks that flew as his claws clashed against the blade, the sheer force driving me back slightly. Of course, I was being pushed back by him, his strength is thoroughly superior. But none of those mattered when it came to mana. So, it was almost impossible for him to win. Zoom. A layer of mana covered my sword, causing him to step back cautiously. Then, he dropped to all fours and dashed towards me again. Clang. Clang. He began to leap and attack, creating distance between us before swinging his claws at me and then jumping away to strike again. He repeated this tactic for a few seconds until I finally caught it. Grabbed his tail without any hesitation. With a firm grip, I swung him down toward the ground. Grr. Thud. He let out a growl as his face slammed against the earth. But it wasn't over. Still holding onto his tail, I started swinging him around, making his face hit the ground multiple times. Thud. Bam. However, he then escaped my hands. Come on, kitty. I let out a small smile, stepping closer to him. This is getting boring for me. But this time, I was surprised by his actions. Instead of him getting irritated, Agner's furious expression melted into a wide, unnerving grin. Seal. He declared, and suddenly a bright magic pattern appeared beneath me. I felt the flow of my mana in my body stop. Sealing my mana power, huh? I glanced at the glowing circle and nodded, almost impressed. Smart. He likely understood that he couldn't win against me if I used mana, and despite having low-level mana, he still possessed enough quantity to cast this sealing spell. Haha, now do you think you can win? His eyes turned murderous, and he looked at me like I was some kind of prey. Actually, I've been holding back my power, and you're the only strong enough opponent for me to use this form. You should be honored, he declared loudly with a crazy smile. In that instant, his fur began to shift to a brighter shade of white, and his height increased by more than 50 centimeters. His claws became sharper as a deep white layer of mana enveloped his body. The divine white tiger's bloodline. I couldn't believe that I had met his bearer. This was indeed going to be a problem. Everyone was watching Estria's battle from their respective station, and one could easily notice that things now had been complicated for him. He had his mana sealed, and his opponent was revealed to be the bearer of the divine white tiger's bloodline, one of the 4 mythical beasts. Amongst them was Ella, whose face changed repeatedly as Estria was about to be in danger but then dodged the tiger's attack. Come on, Estria. Her heart was beating faster, but inside, she prayed that Estria would still win. Well, not really. If he was her opponent in the future, she doubted her chances of winning. Only if she used her ultimate move might she have a chance. Things got rough for Estria. Beside her, Lucas muttered, his eyes narrowing as he watched the battle. He was also very interested in Estria, viewing him as a potential battle partner due to his strength. Training with him would definitely enhance his combat skills. At that moment, the white tiger launched his body towards Estria, opening his mouth widely and showing his sharp teeth. But Estria quickly slid beneath him before using a cleaning spell. Ha! What? This moment made everyone confused. Why was he using a cleaning spell during the middle of a fight? And that's when something hit them. Did he just use magic? Isn't his mana supposed to be sealed? Gasps spread like wildfire. The white tiger skidded to a halt, his claws digging into the dirt as he whipped his head around to glare at Estria. What the hell? He growled, with disbelief splattered on his face. What? Did you really think such a weak seal could contain my mana? Estria casually said, arranging the sleeves of his leader's suit. While it may be difficult to break by simply locating its weak point, it can easily be destroyed if its mana sealing capacity is compromised due to an overload of mana. The tiger's eyes widened in shock, his mouth slightly agape.
Why you? He gulped down hard.
And just after he analyzed Estria's body, he took a step back cautiously, before shouting in an annoyed tone. How fast does your mana recover? What kind of monster is this? Even the crowd went crazy upon hearing Estria's casual remark and the white tiger's loud yet shaky words. Seeing this expression on his face, Estria smiled lightly, taking a step forward.
Enough talk, kitty.
Ready for the fight you were so desperate for. Estria casually dropped his sword to the ground and raised his fists, adopting a hand-to-hand stance. Seeing this, a huge vein popped in the white tiger's forehead and his eyes burned red with rage. You damned bastard. He dashed towards Etria like a lightning bolt. How dare you disrespect me like this? His claws extended even larger than before. He horizontally swung them at Estria's chest. Whoosh! Estria ducked low, evading the strike by a hair's breadth. And before the tiger could recover, Estria planted his feet and delivered a sharp uppercut to his chin. Crack! Gawk! The tiger's head snapped back, saliva and blood spraying from his mouth as he staggered. Not giving him a moment to recover, Estria surged forward, aiming a punch at his solar plexus, but the white tiger quickly crossed his arms in an X form, protecting himself from the blow. Unfortunately, it was a fake. He stopped in his tracks just before his punch cold land and pivoted on his heel, twisting his body like a coiled spring before delivering a spinning kick infused with mana. Wham! The kick landed squarely on the tiger's face, sending him tumbling across the ground like a ragdoll. Thud! 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 He finally came to a stop, blood pouring from his nose, his once pristine white fur now colored in dust and crimson. Ouch! Even the crowd couldn't help but exclaim, seeing how he practically cleaned the dust off the ground. Then, Estria approached him. Hey, what did you think of our battle? Did it go as you expected it to go? Estria kept a small smile on his lips. The white tiger's face twisted in rage, blood dripping from his mouth as he glared up at Estria and parted his lips. Motherphew! Before he could finish, Estria's fist smashed into his jaw, sending him flying across the arena. Crash! He slammed into the protective barrier with a sickening thud before crumpling to the ground, unmoving, blood pooling beneath him. The arena went silent for a moment before the announcer's voice boomed. The winner is the Silverleaf's leader, Aestria. The crowd erupted into cheers, the stands shaking with excitement. Estria turned to face them, brushing off his sleeves as if the fight had been nothing more than a warm-up. However, damn it. I think I reached my limit for today. He wasn't invincible. The cheers of the crowd filled the air as I walked off the arena stage. My victory over Agner had secured another point for Silverleaf Academy, but the adrenaline that had kept me upright began to fade as I entered the quieter hallway leading to the resting area. Thump! A sharp, dull ache jolted through my chest. Thump thump. My breathing grew shallow and erratic. The world blurred for a second, and I stumbled, catching myself against the cold stone wall. Ugh! I gritted my teeth, trying to steady my trembling legs. Immediately, I ran to the outside of the arena, more precisely the forest, where no one could see me. I hadn't warned my classmates or Vivian, but I couldn't let anyone see me in this condition. Regarding their battles, I have already explained most of the abilities of the Beastkin representatives, so Vivian should know how to match them up. Reaching the forest, the trees stretched high above, their canopies casting a cool shade. The damp earth beneath my boots crunched softly as I leaned heavily against a tree. Thump! Another sharp pain shot through my chest, and a bitter metallic taste flooded my mouth. Damn it! And before I could suppress it, I coughed violently. Spurt! A mouthful of blood splattered onto the cold dirt floor, staining it crimson. My vision swayed, and my legs felt weak. My constitution, or the way my mana veins are tangled with each other, despite granting me a huge speed in the way mana manifests, comes with a huge cost. After all, I'm not really blessed like Lucas will be in the future. The cost of me using mana like this is something similar to losing my lifespan. It's not really my lifespan, but my soul power. And that's the main reason my spirit attribute is rank S. It's something that came with this cursed constitution. So, I'm not really terminally ill, but I need to restore my soul power from while to while, and just this month, I had already used more than 3 times the necessary use for a month. And if that happens, I'll need to start using aura, which can complicate things for me, since my disposition is violet. I know that someday it will be revealed, but I need to make sure that I don't turn into one of the targets of the Dark Order.
At least not now. Gag. Splurt.
Ugh, fucking hell. This time, the liquid that erupted from my mouth was dark and viscous, like tar, which could be called the impurities of my body. This meant that my body had been strengthened once again, but unfortunately, none of my attributes had leveled up. You're so reckless. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence. I glanced up to see Eleonora stepping out from behind a tree, her cold, piercing gaze fixed on the puddle of blood and impurities at my feet. I didn't respond immediately, taking a moment to wipe the last traces of blood from my lips. You know what happens if you keep this up, don't you? She said in a low voice but still sharp as a dagger. I met her gaze without flinching. Our constitution wasn't designed to handle this level of mana output. If you keep pushing it, you'll destroy your mana veins. She continued, stepping closer to me.
Permanently.
Ha! I let out a bitter laugh.
This woman.
She was so annoying. The only reason she wanted me as her disciple was to study this cursed condition. Because she had it too. She gave it the name
Twin Heart Mana Body.
The reason she named it this is that the Constitution allows the user to create an additional heart on their body. This grants them the ability to store mana in both of their hearts, effectively doubling their output. Moreover, the Constitution provides additional benefits, such as a 5 times faster input and output ability. Overall, this means the user can achieve up to 10 times the normal mana power. However, one would need something similar to a dragon's heart to fuse it with their body. When she first asked me to be her disciple, I was actually ecstatic. However, as soon as I realized something, I immediately refused. The one who oversees the students' applications is the headmistress herself, and I was rejected because they didn't see talent in me. It was pretty dramatic, but yeah, after all at that time, my dream had been shattered by her herself, so I didn't care about being polite anymore. I had a lot of friends during that time, and the bad rumors of the nobility disrespecting the commoners in the Royal Academy simply disgusted me. No way I would accept her offer. But she left a mysterious phrase before she left, saying something like, "You will need me." And something bad really happened. The first time I had this problem, I vomited a pool of blood a few times and my mana got in distress. Thankfully, I was able to solve it, but then she appeared in front of me as if teasing me. "I told you. You're going to need me in the future." Which I replied coldly. "Hey, are you even listening to me?" She brought her hands to her waist, looking at me while she tilted her head slightly to the left. Her words made my thoughts break, so I turned to face her and replied, "I know about my condition, I don't need you to tell me about it." "Do you?" She pressed, stepping even closer, her brows knitting together. "Because if you did, you wouldn't be burning your soul power like this."
"Back off." I scoffed at her, but she continued on.
"Lose your mana, and lose everything that makes you you." Her words landed like a blow, and before I realized it, my back was pressed against the tree, her hand slamming against the bark beside my head. "I just need to find Lich Orb, or a dragon heart," I muttered slightly, meeting her eyes. I knew that there was one last dragon heart on the luxurious commerce store. And I had been saving my money for that. The amount of money I owned was nowhere near it, but I couldn't simply let myself die. Not until my classmates had graduated safely and got their dream job. "Ha! And you think you have enough money to afford that?" She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a cold smirk. "I've seen what you were doing in the few months. Even if you sell many high-ranking demon beasts' cores, or even named demon beasts, it will take at least 10 to 15 years for you to gather enough money." That's how expensive the dragon's heart was. The Lich Orb was much cheaper, but it could only serve as a mana storage item and not as a heart, so it wasn't worth it for me to buy. "That's none of your business." I tried to push her back, but surprisingly, she didn't budge at all. Her ocean eyes gazed back at me, and her lips parted slightly. In that moment, I knew exactly what she was about to do.
"Be my No."
I interrupted her words directly. "I have no plans to join your academy, or even become your disciple. Besides, why would I accept such an irresponsible person as their master?"
I laughed.
"You constantly let demons attack your academy, and let the students be the ones solving that, not to mention that even the professors don't do anything." My words paused slightly as I stopped speaking. Now that I noticed, she didn't act to stop the demons, and the professors also didn't, only appearing at the last moment.
"Don't tell me."
"Why you are using demons to improve the abilities of your students?" My eyes widened upon the realization. How come I didn't think of that? She was silent upon hearing my words. Only by experiencing a fight that they could potentially die, they can improve their abilities, and even if they were in true danger, one of the professors, or even I would immediately act to save them. Why do you think the students improve so fast in our academy? It's mainly because of the demon constantly attacking it.
Ha! I let out a chuckle. This bitch.
As I thought, she really treats everyone as pawns. Don't worry, she said softly, her eyes locking onto mine with an unfamiliar warmth that felt strangely comforting. If you truly become my disciple, I won't treat you like that. On the contrary, I'll spoil you as if you were my own son. There was a few seconds of silence before I replied to her.
No. Ah, this makes it 5 times already, she sighed.
But like I've said before, you'll need me. She disappeared into mist, leaving me entirely alone in the forest. I didn't say anything, there was nothing to say. Instead, I walked back to the arena where I could see Mia fighting against a tigress, and surprisingly, Mia was being pushed back by her. How's the score? I asked Derek, who was watching the battle. 4-4, if Mia wins this match, we're going to pass to the next round. His gaze switched to me before going towards the stage once again. Besides me, Vivian tapped my shoulder. Where were you? I just went to take a breather.
Sure.
Her hands brushed against my back, as her eyes turned into the arena. Our academy was depending on Mia right at that moment. Crack! The tip of Mia's staff slammed against the tigress's claws, creating a shockwave that rippled through the air. The impact forced both of them back, but Mia used the momentum to flip gracefully, landing in a crouch.
Ack! She winced in pain.
The force of the tigress's attack had nearly dislocated her shoulder. You're stronger than you look. The tigress admitted as her orange eyes narrowed slightly. And you're slower than I thought. Mia shot back, a smirk tugging at her lips, and this time, she decided to switch her tactics. Fire series, barrage barrier. 3rd level spell. She twirled her staff, the crystal at its tip glowing brighter. Sparks of fiery red energy crackled around her, forming a protective barrier. The tigress lunged again, swinging her claws at the barrier. Clang! Her claws bounced off the shield, but the impact sent a ripple of hot energy shooting up her arm. The barrier was made of condensed flames after all.
Gar!
The tigress growled in frustration. Running out of steam, huh? Mia taunted as her smirk widened. The tigress's eyes flashed. She slammed her fists into the ground, causing the earth to tremble. Thram! The ground beneath Mia cracked and buckled, sending her sprawling.
Thud! Damn it!
Mia hissed, scrambling to her feet. The tigress saw her opening and charged.
Swish!
At the last second, Mia spun her staff, slamming it into the ground. Fire series, Fire Nova. 4th level spell. A burst of hot energy erupted from the crystal, spreading outward in a wave. Crack! Crack! The tigress's legs were caught on fire, halting her mid-charge. The crowd erupted in cheers as Mia seized the moment. She channeled the last of her energy into her staff, the red crystal glowing so brightly it almost hurt to look at. Fire series, Fire Lance Impact. 5th level spell. With a loud cry, Mia hurled a massive lance of fire directly at the tigress.
Boom!
The attack struck the tigress square in the chest, sending her flying backward, making her hit the ground hard, the air knocked out from her lungs. The tigress's body had landed outside the arena. It was at that moment that the announcer's voice rang out. The winner of the final match is Mia, from the Silverleaf Academy.
She did it.
For a split second, there was silence, then the crowd erupted.
Yeearea.
The applause and cheers rolled like thunder, shaking the very ground. Some spectators leaped to their feet, clapping and whistling, while others pounded the air with fists of celebration. And with that, I proudly announced the 3 academies moving to the next round: the Holy Academy, the Eternum Royal Academy, and surprisingly, the Silverleaf Academy.
Woohoo!
The cheers increased even more. Mia staggered off the stage, her legs wobbling beneath her. Her hair clung to her face, damp with sweat, and her breathing was labored, but her grin outshone it all, a smile filled with pride. That's our girl. One of our classmates yelled, their voices barely audible over the chaos. Cheers erupted among our group.
Ha! She did it.
Vivian let out a relieved sigh, clapping enthusiastically. Finally reaching our station, Mia's eyes scanned the crowd as she limped toward us as her grin gradually widened. Mia, that was amazing. Derek called out as she got closer. But Mia wasn't listening. Her gaze locked onto me, and suddenly, she broke into a full sprint.
Mia!
I called out, confused as to why she was approaching me. And before I could react, she launched herself into the air.
Puff.
Her arms wrapped tightly around my neck, her body colliding with mine as her legs dangled off the ground. I stumbled back, barely staying upright, as her soft, large breasts pressed against my chest, making my face flush crimson. "You were a Motzi." I started, but my words caught in my throat as Mia leaned in, and her lips immediately found mine, pressing against them with a huge intensity.
Moi.
The world seemed to freeze.
What?
Gasps rippled through our classmates, followed by stunned silence. Derek's jaw dropped comically, his eyes bulging as if they might pop out of his head. What?
Oh. My. God.
The rest of our team, already high on adrenaline and joy, erupted in laughter and cheers.
Go MIA. One of them yelled.
When Mia finally pulled back, her cheeks were as pink as her grin was radiant. Her eyes sparkled with pure happiness, her hands still resting on my shoulders. "We're going to the next round," she exclaimed, bouncing in place like a child who'd just won the biggest prize. I blinked, trying to process what had just happened, but soon, my expression broke into a faint smile. "Ha, since you won, I'll let you have this one." Hearing my words, she looked at me with a wide grin, sticking out her tongue. We had passed the first phase of the competition. Now we were no longer
the weakest academy.
"Ha, the hotel's bed really is comfortable," I muttered, collapsing onto the soft mattress. The plush fabric embraced me as I rolled onto my side, the exhaustion of the day melting away.
"Master."
Lumi's soft voice pulled me back from my drifting thoughts. She was lying beside me, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the dim light. Her large, innocent eyes were fixed on mine, but I could see the fatigue behind them. I had used her as a weapon earlier, and even though she always insisted she didn't mind, I knew it took a toll on her. "Here, have some sugar cubes," I said, holding out my palm to her.
Yay! Her mood flipped instantly.
Lumi practically launched herself at the sugar cubes, chomping down on them with audible enthusiasm. Her cheeks puffed slightly as she chewed, and I couldn't help but smile at the sight. She looked cute, like a squirrel munching on his food. "Ha, thank God it's 1 day per round, if not, we wouldn't have a chance of winning," I muttered to myself. The Academy's competition takes 3 whole days since they've decided that after each phase, the students would need to rest to recharge their energies. And I'm damn thankful for that.
Slurp. I blinked. MHM?
What is this feeling? I turned to Lumi once again, and I felt a shiver running down my spine as I suddenly saw her body changing into a pink color, and her pupils turning into a vertical slit. "Master." Her voice took on a sultry, unfamiliar tone, and before I could react, she reached out and grasped my hand. Her fingers were surprisingly firm as she brought my hand to her mouth, her tongue darting out to swirl around my fingertips, licking off the remnants of sugar.
"Lumi, stop."
I called out to her, taking my hand out of her mouth. But something was different. Her tongue was different, it was
longer.
But then, she lunged forward, her sharp teeth grazing my finger.
Ack.
A sting shot through me as a few drops of blood welled up on my skin. Her unnaturally long tongue shot out, snatching the drops in one single movement. And that was when I truly saw her tongue. It was a long tongue, very reminiscent of a snake's, having a split in the middle.
"Don't tell me."
I gulped audibly, prompting her to look at me with curious yet sharp eyes. In the novel, there was a mention of an ancient creature called the gluttonous slime. This rare type of slime could absorb the racial traits of creatures it devoured and replicate their abilities, sometimes even their physical characteristics. Was Lumi one of them? No wonder she had been targeted by that insane scientist. Not to mention that she must be the reason the morph weapon she became was considered a high-grade artifact. So, if the Holy Nation truly saw me with her, I could potentially become their target of elimination. God damn it. My life is only getting more complicated with each passing second. Now, how do I get you back to normal? I muttered, rubbing my temples as she continued suckling my finger, her tongue savoring every drop of blood like it was the most exquisite treat in existence. But the moment I spoke, she stopped. Her tongue withdrew slowly, and her vertical pupils met mine. "Hey, what are you doing?" She crawled closer to me until her face was just a few centimeters away. Her tongue stuck out, and suddenly, lick. She licked my neck, causing my body to quiver unnaturally. "Master Tasty." Her voice dripped with delight, and a shiver ran through my body as her tongue glided down my neck. "Stop," I uttered coldly, making her tongue retract back almost immediately. Whoa. This was more effective than I had thought. And if that wasn't enough, the pink hue faded, her snake-like traits disappearing as quickly as they had come. In moments, She was back to her usual shimmering green form with her long cyan-tinted hair framing her small, innocent face. "Master!" she called out, tilting her head in her usual manner, full of curiosity.
Ha!
I let out a long sigh of relief and reached out to pat her head. She leaned into my touch, her eyes closing as a contented hum escaped her lips. "You're too cute for your own good. However, if this cute thing is a gluttonous smile, it's going to be a very, very big problem if someone finds out."
Damn it.
Leaning my back against the bed, Lumi snuggled into my chest and let out a small giggle right next to my ear. I hope this peaceful atmosphere doesn't go away. The next day, after waking up and finishing my daily routine, I rushed out to the arena. My classmates were probably already there waiting for me. I was already late. Gosh, I hate mornings.
Clang.
The sharp clash of metal greeted me as I entered the arena. Two figures were sparring under the morning sun.
Ella and Lucas.
Seeing them locked in combat, I exhaled a sigh of relief.
I wasn't late after all. But something felt off.
The usually bustling arena was strangely empty.
Ha! Aestria?
Ella stammered, her voice faltering mid-swing as her eyes landed on me.
MHM? Oh hey.
I greeted her with a casual smile and nodded toward Lucas, who lowered his weapon slightly. "What are you doing here?" Lucas asked, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. I was confused but decided to ask nonetheless. "I thought the second phase was happening right now?" Lucas chuckled, shaking his head. "Let me guess, you're not good with mornings?"
Not at all.
He smirked faintly before explaining.
Today's competition is postponed.
It seems the Saintess had an issue and needed to take a day off to heal from some injuries.
Ha, no wonder.
I muttered, stretching my arms until I heard a satisfying crack. "Well, thanks for letting me know. Guess I'll leave you two lovebirds alone," I teased with a sly grin, turning on my heel to leave.
Wait.
"We're not lovebirds," Ella shouted after me, her cheeks flushing a deep red. I chuckled at her reaction but didn't stop walking. Lucas remained silent, though I caught the subtle twitch of his lips. Ella's future is designed to be with Lucas, so in the future, she'll probably turn into his wife. Although I teased her in Lavoisier's cafe, that shouldn't change their relationship, right? Well, it doesn't really matter. If today is a free day, then I guess I'll take a trip around the capital. But then, something struck me.
Wait a second.
Did Lucas say something about the Saintess having a problem? Immediately, I turned back and then approached Lucas again. "What are you doing here again?" Lucas asked, exasperation creeping into his voice. "I just have a small question, I won't bother you too much. What exactly happened to the Saintess?" Hearing my words, Lucas had a thoughtful expression as held his chin, but then he finally seemed to have remembered something. "I think it was something related to the attack of demon beasts." I froze entirely.
Demon beasts.
It seems that more and more demon beasts seem to be appearing around the capital, more precisely around the forest zone. And unfortunately, many people got injured because of that.
Some people even.
His voice trailed off, and his expression turned somber.
Died.
I went blank upon hearing his words.
Estria?
Ella called out to me, seemingly staring at my face. What kind of expression was I making, I wondered. "You okay?" She stepped closer, concern etched across her face. But my lips quickly curled into a smile as I replied to her with the same tone.
"I'm fine.
Just thinking about something. I'll be going now," I said, leaving them alone.
His expression."
Ella murmured softly.
Lucas glanced at her, then nodded. He seemed a little bit off.
As if something that shouldn't have happened, actually happened. Exactly. Ella bit her lip, a flicker of unease crossing her features.
Fuck.
My mind was a whirlwind as I stormed through the corridors, heading straight for the forest.
Swoop.
Crash. I slammed my fist into a tree, splintering it in half. The crack echoed through the stillness, but it did nothing to calm the rage boiling inside me. I gritted my teeth as I swung yet another punch at some other three.
Why? Why?
I was warned by the system. I could prevent people from being dead. And instead of investigating, damn it. I shouldn't have gone to the academy competition when I knew that there was a fucking horde of demon beasts coming to attack.
Damn it. Thrash.
Another tree shattered, then another, as my fists tore through the forest. The gusts from my strikes toppled even those untouched. I bit down hard on my lip, tasting the faint metallic tang of blood. I should have investigated sooner. I should have taken the warnings seriously.
I can't wait anymore.
I growled through my gritted teeth. I'll leave a note for Vivian or something. Furrowing my eyebrows, I went back to the hotel where I met Lumi and made her transform back into a sword. Then, I walked to Vivian's hotel room and left a small note before leaving for the forest. The note talked about how I would probably only appear during the last phase of the competition if they indeed passed without me. Along with that, it was the weakness and fighting ways of every opponent that I had seen fighting. I hope they can hold on without me and reach the last phase of the competition. Besides, if there's a chance of that horde of monsters appearing, I need to make sure they die before it's too late. Even if I told the Sword Circle or the Holy Nation, they probably wouldn't believe it. So, I'll need to make this my own way. I was still wearing my leader's suit as I walked down the forest, and couldn't see my expression. Sometimes I couldn't help but think, was this an expression by Estria or me?
Or both of us?
I knew we had become a single entity, but still. It felt strange, this rage coming deeply from my heart. I was never infuriated like this before, but why was I so mad?
I didn't know. But soon enough,
something reached my nostrils. The disgusting smell of blood.
Shit.
Estria muttered under his breath as he stepped into the forest. The sight before him was like something out of a nightmare. The trees and bushes were drenched in blood, droplets running down their stem and leaves like crimson rain. The ground was littered with mangled bodies, twisted and broken in ways that made his stomach churn. Some were still twitching faintly, a grotesque reminder of the life they had lost moments ago.
Gar.
Low growls filled the air as wolf-like creatures with glowing red eyes appeared in his vision. Their teeth, sharp and glistening, tore into the corpses with wet, crunching sounds, scattering bits of flesh and bone as they devoured their prey. The sight made his stomach turn. And suddenly, one of the creatures stopped eating. Its ears twitched, and it lifted its head, sniffing the air. Slowly, its glowing eyes turned toward him.
Grrrrrrr.
Immediately, the demon beast lunged towards Estria, its jaws snapping shut mere inches from Estria's face. He quickly dodged its attack and enveloped his sword with mana before swinging it. The crescent wave of icy energy shot forward, slicing through the air with a chilling whistle.
Splurt.
The wave struck the demon beast, cleaving the wolf cleanly in half. Blood sprayed violently from the bisected beast, splattering across Estria's clothes and face. He didn't flinch, his eyes were cold as the now lifeless halves of the beast hit the ground with a sickening thud.
Ah, wolf-type demon beasts. This is indeed a big problem.
However, if they are only C+ rank demon beasts, it shouldn't pose a problem for now.
Gruel.
Emerging from the shadows were more wolves, their glowing red eyes piercing the darkness. Their mangy fur bristled as they bared their teeth, some with trails of blood already dripping from fresh wounds on their bodies. It was as if these beasts had fought their way through the forest, drawn to the scent of blood. God damn it, just what I needed, Estria said sarcastically, gripping his sword tightly. Immediately, Lumi transformed into a handgun, and a bullet shot rang out.
Splat. Bam.
The moment the bullet pierced the wolf's body, a few spikes of ice emerged, killing a group of wolves around him. Blood spattered the ground as the wolves yelped in agony. But more kept coming, their relentless hunger pushing them forward. Growl. They lunged towards Estria. He immediately leaped back, gathering distance before two consecutive shots rang out.
Freeze.
One of the wolves turned into a statue, and then, the second shot hit the frozen statue, making small shards spread across the forest, hitting more beasts. He gathered more distance and looked forward, seeing even more wolves approaching him with their ominous red eyes reminiscent of his own. Huff. He took a deep breath as his eyes started glowing even more. He planted his feet firmly on the ground, channeling his mana into Lumi, making her turn back into a sword. The sword began to glow with a silver light, frost forming along its edge. Slam. Mixed Ice Series, Ice Lotus Explosion. 5th level spell. He drove his sword into the earth, and an enormous ice lotus erupted from the ground. The crystalline petals expanded outward, sharp as blades, impaling the wolves that dared to come too close. Blood sprayed in every direction, splattering across the frozen ground and staining the pristine ice crimson. Ha-ack. Estria winced as pain shot through his arm. Glancing down, he noticed the mana vein in his arm had ruptured again. Damn it, not right now. Having a plan in mind, he closed his eyes for a while as the wolves slowly approached him, with their mouths salivating. Growl. A group of 4 jumped into him, prompting Estria to shoot his eyes open and swiftly leap back. I'll need to try and create a suitable mana vessel for my arm. This can take a few hours. He muttered to himself, as his eyes scanned the forest around him. He was looking for something similar to a cave so that he could hide himself for a while to heal back his arm.
Roar.
With his mouth wide open, a wolf suddenly appeared, catching Estria off guard. In that instant, Estria twisted his body mid-air, delivering a sharp bicycle kick that landed squarely on the beast's jaw.
Tam.
The wolf was sent flying, blood pouring from its mouth as it crashed into a tree, leaving a streak of red on the bark. It was at that moment that a small cave appeared in his eyes. He immediately created a floating ice platform and pressed his foot firmly on it, enveloping it with mana.
Swoop.
He propelled himself toward the cave, rolling inside just as another pack of wolves lunged for him. Crash. He slammed his hand against the ground, creating a thick ice barrier at the cave's entrance that could protect him for a while. The snarling and clawing of the beasts echoed faintly from the other side.
Ha huff.
I can finally take a rest. He sighed in relief, collapsing against the cave wall. He immediately settled into a lotus position and began gathering mana in his right arm to create a temporary mana vessel. This would allow him to use his arm as a mana vein without damaging his actual mana veins.
Ha!
A cold breath escaped his mouth as a faint layer of ice started to envelop his body. This technique was what Estria called crystallization, which could make his body heal 3 times faster than normal. Due to his extremely high affinity with ice, the coldness from the ice would help heal his injuries. And so, he remained in that position, allowing himself to heal over time. This process would take over 15 hours. The next day, the air was thick with tension as the 3 remaining academies gathered in the center of the grand arena, while the eliminated academies watched from the crowded stands. All eyes were on the arena floor, where the next phase of the academy competition was about to begin.
Yet, something felt off.
The person who had stolen the spotlight in the first phase, the one who made others seem insignificant just by his presence, was nowhere to be seen. Where is Silverleaf's leader? Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. How come he isn't here? A murmur of confusion rippled through the audience. Even the announcer hesitated, glancing at the Silverleaf Academy station before clearing his throat awkwardly. Well, since everyone except one person seems to be here, I'll go ahead and explain the rules for the second phase. The crowd quieted down, leaning in to hear him. It's pretty simple actually. Each academy selects one student to enter the arena. Then, a student from another academy will step in to challenge them. The winner stays in the arena and earns a point for their academy, but the loser is eliminated and cannot participate again. A buzz of excitement swept through the crowd. The competition had just gotten more intense. Did everyone understand? The announcer asked, gripping the microphone. What if a student wins a match? Can they leave the arena after that? Ella asked curiously. After all, one student could win a match and then rest. Hearing Ella's questions, everyone was filled with curiosity. They had forgotten about that detail.
Good point.
No, once a student enters the arena, they cannot leave until they lose or win the entire phase for their academy. Any other questions? The crowd fell silent. Nobody else raised their hand nor asked any questions. All right then. The announcer's voice boomed, reigniting the energy in the arena. Let the second phase of the academy's competition begin. At that moment, no one dared to enter, but everyone's gaze instinctively turned towards the Silverleaf station. If Estria had been present, he would likely have been the first to enter the arena. Guess I'll be the one to go, Lucas said, also looking at Silverleaf station as he stepped into the arena. He was confident that he could earn at least 5 points for his academy. However, as soon as he stepped into the arena, the conversation between him and Estria from yesterday flashed on his mind. But he quickly shrugged it off as he saw the Saintess in the Holy Academy station. Soon enough, another figure stepped into the arena. The crowd gasped as they recognized her that it was Christina, the Saintess. As she walked forward, her gaze locked onto Lucas. The tension in the air thickened. Slowly, she brought out her staff, and in an instant, a golden light erupted around her, cascading like sunlight breaking through a storm. Lucas's eyes widened as his grip tightened around his sword. He could see that she was planning to go all out. Christina as a Saintess had a very good eye for people, and could easily measure everyone's strength, except Estria's.
He was a mystery to her.
Lucas was like an open book to her. She knew his power was comparable to A-rank Awakener's, and that made him a threat. If she didn't take him down, he could rack up enough points to put his academy in the lead. She couldn't let that happen. May the first match begin. The announcer's voice rang out across the arena. After this, anyone who enters can jump straight into battle. The moment the words ended, Lucas exploded into action.
Swoop.
He lunged at Christina, faster than the crowd expected.
Clang.
Their weapons collided, the sound reverberating like a thunderclap, as a deep golden light erupted in every way.
Chew.
Lucas was pushed back, his shoes sinking into the ground as he struggled to withstand the impact of their exchange. Immediately, Christina didn't give Lucas a chance. Her golden staff glowed brightly as she raised it high, her mana surging in waves. Holy Academy Series, Holy Beam. 4th level spell. A golden beam shot towards Lucas, prompting him to leap to the side. However, Christina kept her aim steady, directing the beam to follow him as he dashed around the arena. Then, his stance shifted slightly as a black flame enveloped his sword. Demon Slaying Sword Art. Corrupted Sword. Advanced Level Swordsmanship B+. Clang. Their weapon met, each one trying to push the other back, but slowly, the black flames on Lucas's sword began to consume the golden light radiating from Christina's staff. Seeing this, she immediately jumped back, grabbed daggers from her waist, and threw them at Lucas. Clang clang. Lucas easily deflected them with his sword, but just in that instant, the daggers suddenly exploded.
Boom. Thrrrr. Kook.
Blood spurted from his lips as he was hurled backward like a ragdoll. He tumbled across the arena floor before slamming his sword into the ground to stop his momentum, coming to a halt just a meter away from the arena's edge.
Ha, she's really tricky, he said, panting.
Wiping the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, he got up. However, Christian didn't waste any second. She thrust her staff forward. The air around her shimmered, glowing runes forming an intricate circle in front of her. Holy Academy Series, Holy Chains. 4th level spell. Golden chains shot out from the circle, twisting and writhing like serpents as they raced toward Lucas. He barely had time to react, swinging his sword to intercept them. The first few chains disintegrated on contact with the black flames, but more kept coming, relentless and unyielding.
TCH.
Lucas clicked his tongue and spun as his sword sliced through chain after chain. But they weren't just aiming for his sword, they snaked around his legs and arms, pulling tight like a trap. Before he could fully counter, Christina was already moving. She raised her staff high, the air around her shimmering with heat. Holy Academy Series, Divine Smite. 5th level spell.
Boom.
The heavens themselves seemed to crack open as a column of blinding light descending with devastating force.
Whoosh.
Lucas planted his sword into the ground, a protective barrier of dark flames roaring to life around him. The light clashed against his flames, the ground beneath him splitting. Lucas gritted his teeth, his muscles trembling under the pressure.
Come on, he growled, his voice straining.
He pushed upward, and the flames surged in response, shattering the light.
Ha!
Christina stumbled back, her breath hitching, but her sharp gaze never wavered as she raised her staff once again, floating orbs of light materializing around her. Each orb crackled ominously before Christina uttered, "Go!" Swoop. The orbs were sent towards Lucas, and he quickly ducked, dodging one of the orbs, but immediately, his shoulder was met with one of the orbs.
Boom.
It exploded, making him spin in mid-air, but he recovered, twisting into a counterstrike. His sword flashed, dark flames surging forward toward Christina. Their weapons met again, the impact resounding with a loud sound as sparks flew, and Christina's grip faltered for the briefest moment. In that instant, Lucas's eyes narrowed. Demon Slaying Sword Art.
Devastation Sword.
Advanced Level Swordsmanship A. The dark flames erupted into a massive vortex with a deafening sound, the energy crackling like thunder. Lucas swung his sword with all his might, the black fire cutting through Christina's defenses. Clang. Her staff flew from her hands, and she dropped to one knee, her breathing ragged.
Ha huff ah.
The arena went silent except for Lucas's heavy breaths. His sword lowered, the flames dissipating with a quiet hiss. It was silent for a few seconds.
Ooh woo woo. So cool.
The crowd erupted in cheers. Christina, still catching her breath, slowly pushed herself off the ground and walked back to her station. But just as the noise from the crowd began to settle, something shifted. One of the students from Silverleaf Academy stepped forward.
It was Mia.
As soon as she set foot on the arena floor, a soft glow of mana flickered around her, but then it thickened, swirling and tightening as a cyclone of flames ignited in her hands. Lucas's eyes widened, and he immediately tensed, preparing himself for the attack.
Whoosh.
His instincts kicked in, and he quickly enveloped his sword in its usual dark flame and swung it vertically, aiming to split the cyclone in half.
Whoosh.
The black flames cut through the fiery barrier, splitting the cyclone as he'd hoped. But before he could even take a breath, a flash of movement appeared right in front of him. Mia was there in an instant, her hands pressed against his chest.
Ah.
He barely had time to react.
Bomb.
A violent shockwave sent Lucas flying backward, the flames of the cyclone spinning around him, engulfing him in a fiery spiral. He couldn't control his momentum, his body helpless as the flames continued to push him through the air.
Thud.
Lucas hit the cold, hard ground of the arena with a grunt, pain shooting through his body. The crowd, once alive with energy, fell into stunned silence as the crowd processed what had just happened. Lucas stood there for a moment, dazed, as the overwhelming sensation of defeat hit him. He had barely managed to win the first match, but now, he had already lost the second one in the blink of an eye. Ha, it really worked as Estrella said. Mia muttered to herself as she smiled with quiet satisfaction. She turned and walked toward her next opponent as if she hadn't just knocked out one of the strongest students. The small note Estrella had left had multiple situations of how to deal with certain students. Vivian was firstly shocked and worried upon reading the note, but she quickly cleared her head and then explained to the others about Estrella's plan. None of them refused his plans. They all believed him. Never did he let them off. And soon, the rounds of the competition went on. Mia was a huge help for Silverleaf, winning a total of 3 matches in a row before losing because she didn't have enough mana. The brothers Derek and James both won 2 matches, while Maria actually was a bit more undefeated as she won 3 matches like Mia. As for the other students, all of them had actually had a great performance thanks to Estrella's note that helped them, even though most of them didn't win a single match. From them, it was crazy to think that Estrella had formulated so many plans just from watching the students for a few hours or so. But, of course, they were thankful that he did so. In the end, Silverleaf Academy had managed to secure exactly 12 wins. The Royal Academy had dominated with 26 wins, and the Holy Academy.
BAM.
The last student from the Holy Academy was sent flying out of the arena, crashing to the ground with a resounding thud. With that, the Royal Academy now had 27 wins, and the Holy Academy was left with only 11.
The result was clear.
Alright everyone, with only one student left standing, I'm proud to announce the 2 academies that will be moving on to the final round. The announcer's voice rang out. There was a pause, the tension building as the crowd leaned in. First, the academy everyone expected, the prestigious Eternum Royal Academy. The crowd went wild, cheers and shouts echoing all over the arena. Everyone had known the Royal Academy would make it to the finals. Their victory felt almost guaranteed, and the excitement felt a little more like relief than surprise. And finally, the announcer's voice shifted, building the suspense, the one that nobody expected, the true dark horse of this competition. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by eager whispers. The Silverleaf Academy. The reaction was immediate and loud. Cheers, whistles, claps, but even though the noise was huge, the students of Silverleaf couldn't help but feel a little off. It wasn't the celebration they had imagined. They stood there looking around, but no one moved to run into the arena or wave a flag.
It felt wrong. After all,
Estrella, their leader and the one who practically granted them this victory,
wasn't present. Master.
The barrier is almost broken. Lumi's panicked voice reached my ears as I shot my eyes open.
Just in time.
A small smile tugged at my lips as I reached out to gently pat Lumi's head. Master? She asked, tilting her head to the side in that adorable way of hers. I couldn't help but chuckle softly at the sight. Lumi, it's time for you to test your special abilities. I softly caressed her cheek as I spoke, and though she looked a little confused, she nodded eagerly.
MHM.
Without another word, she transformed back into a sword. I ran my fingers lightly over the blade before gripping the hilt firmly. Crack! The ice barrier I had set up hours ago splintered apart with a sharp sound. I had spent the past few hours creating a mana vessel for my right arm, and it was holding up, at least for now. It should last a solid 3 days. Even if I had to use the third move of my sword art. It wasn't the cheapest thing to make, but I didn't care. My life was more than worth it. Lumi, activate the snake ability. I muttered slightly, and slowly, I felt a rush running up my spine.
Ack.
A sharp pain hit my eyes, so intense that I immediately shut them. It wasn't just the pain, something felt off, like something was changing inside me. From one of my wounds, a drop of blood slipped from my body and fell to the ground.
Hiss.
I heard a faint, unsettling hiss. Opening my eyes carefully, I looked down at the spot where the blood had fallen. To my surprise, the blood wasn't just lying there. It started melting through the ground like acid, the stone beneath it dissolving strangely. And that it wasn't the only thing. My vision. No, my entire perception was changing. The heat in the room stood out like a blazing fire, and I could see it. I could feel the cold temperature where the wolves were breaking down my ice barrier. Then, My reflection caught my eye in the blade of my sword.
My pupils. They weren't normal anymore.
My eyes were like Lumi's from before, with vertical pupils in a red shade that looked ominous. And my strength, my agility, both of them seemed to have increased by a lot. It had worked. Because I was in a blood contract with Lumi, I could use her unique abilities. And that meant I had the power of a gluttonous smile. Crack! The wolves finally broke through the ice barrier with a violent roar. But when they saw me standing there, staring at them, their momentum faltered. A few of them hesitated, eyes widening as they locked onto mine. I didn't move, just stood there, looking at them. And then, a slow smile spread across my lips. Gosh. I don't know if it's because I've partly turned into a snake, but I'm hungry. I licked my dry lips. The moment the words left my mouth, I shot forward, faster than I ever had before. Growl. The soft growls of the frightened wolves echoed through the cave. Enhance. Aha. A soft sigh slipped from my lips as I settled down among the lifeless bodies of the demon beasts. The sight was both gruesome and oddly satisfying. Gosh. There were hundreds of them. This should make some money. I smiled to myself as I imagined the amount of money I'd get for these corpses and cores. Unfortunately, I didn't have any spatial ring to store their corpses, and my system was quite useless, except for the part that could foresee a potential outcome.
Oh really?
Suddenly, a panel popped up in front of my eyes, interrupting my thoughts. Ah, you can also appear when you're not needed, I muttered, not even bothering to take a second glance at the panel.
Come on.
I don't even know your functions. Besides, even though you helped me, I don't really trust you. I had read enough novels to know how these systems usually worked. They often turned out to be some kind of power-granting machine for the main character, and I wasn't about to fall into that cliché. If anything, I shouldn't rely too much on it.
But I shrugged it off.
It shouldn't be a big deal. I could handle things on my own, and besides, this system was practically useless anyway.
Estria. MHM.
Why do you think you've transmigrated into this world? I froze at the question. It was something I hadn't really thought about until now. I mean, I had been so caught up in living Estria's life that the idea of why I was here hadn't crossed my mind. After all, with Estria's memories flooding my mind, it felt like I belonged here, like this was my new world, my home. But honestly, I don't see the need to know the reason. I'm having fun in this world. I replied, trying to brush off the question.
I see.
In my past life, I was an award-winning actor, one of the most famous faces in the world. I had experienced the glitz and glamour, but I also had a front-row seat to the darker aspects of human nature. People can be incredibly selfish, driven by their desires and ambitions. I had seen friends turn into rivals and vice versa, hiding their gaze of envy and betrayal. The industry was filled with backstabbing and manipulation, where loyalty was often just a word thrown around to gain favor. It was a world where people would do anything for fame, even if it meant stepping on others to get there. Of course, this also applies in this world. But unlike my past world, this one is actually fun. I'm not a particularly important person, and I can live my life freely. Never had I imagined that I would be able to frequent school again. It's more than refreshing. Then, I hope that you can have fun here. Another panel appeared in front of me as if trying to express empathy towards me. Well, anyways, I have things to do. Judgment S-level skill. I jumped out of the pile of corpses as a faint symbol of a balance scale appeared in my now returned to normal pupils. This pile of wolves wasn't nothing compared to that vision I had. Not to mention, that named demon beast that I saw. From its ominous eyes and the most prominent feature that I saw, its horns that curled back. After that day, I spent quite a few hours in the library, trying to find a named demon beast that could fit that description. And the only one I found was the Bloodclaw Spirit Wolf. A demon beast that was on the lower stages of the S rank, but it was more than enough to destroy an entire country alone. If they didn't have S rank awakeners, of course. Normally, someone like me, who wasn't even an A rank awakened, wouldn't stand a chance against such a beast. I had needed Lucas's help just to take down the bulking demon. So why would I even think about challenging a Bloodclaw Spirit Wolf on my own?
It was simple.
Bloodclaw Spirit Wolves are a very but very rare species. The kind that even in 100 years, wouldn't have a chance to appear. Because of that, their bodies are naturally resistant to any kind of danger, not to mention their bloodline ability. If I had to give a reason as to why I wanted to kill this demon beast so madly other than protecting my classmates, it was because of their bloodline ability. Their blood claws could inflict damage and open wounds with just the slightest touch. I wanted that ability, really badly. Even you, Lumi, you're excited to get stronger, right? I said, glancing at the sword in my hand. To my surprise, it quivered slightly, as if nodding in agreement. I couldn't help but chuckle at the thought. Even if I couldn't kill it.
No.
I was going to kill it.
I had to.
And soon, I found myself in a strangely familiar place. The trees were tall, which didn't allow sunlight to pass through. Their twisted roots sprawled across the ground, making it hard to move without falling. A faint mist hung in the air, growing thicker the farther it stretched, and in the distance, the sound of a running current of water could be heard. The ground was a mess, with broken branches and scorched patches of earth. The smell of burned wood was strong, mixed with the metallic smell of blood.
Ah.
I looked forward, and there, a group of red eyes emerged from the ominous mist as they came from the shadows of the trees. Growl. Their low growls rumbled through the air as they formed a wide circle around me, leaving a massive space in the center. Then, from the mist, a creature stepped forward, more than 5 times the size of the other wolves. It had a blood-colored horn that curled back and diamond-shaped red pupils that seemed to pierce right through me.
Aha.
I found you. I muttered coldly to myself, feeling my pupils shift into vertical slits. I tightened my grip on the sword's handle as I noticed the weaker wolves surrounding me. The named demon beast was clever. It didn't approach directly and instead sent its underlings to wear me down. But I wasn't here to deal with those weaklings. I was going straight for the boss. Mana surged through my legs as I pulled my sword back, shifting into a stance that would allow me to slice through anything in my path.
Then, rumble.
Like a bolt of lightning, I dashed toward the named demon beast.
Clang.
My sword met its blood-colored horn with a resounding clash, the impact sending vibrations up my arm.
Roarer.
Ladies and gentlemen. The announcer's voice boomed across the entire arena, cutting through the chatter and excitement of the crowd. Welcome to the final phase of our annual Academy competition. This last phase will be quite simple, so listen closely. As everyone turned their attention to him, the announcer gestured toward a small portal that shimmered in the center of the arena. Both academies will be entering an artificial dungeon, and the elimination process will work like a team battle royale. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the anticipation build. Each student will wear a special bracelet that acts like a second life. If a student is killed, they will be teleported out of the dungeon, confirming their elimination. The crowd murmured in excitement, and the announcer continued, his voice rising with enthusiasm. Finally, the last student or students standing will declare the winner for their academy. Then, with enough built-up energy, he continued.
From our left,
we have the prestigious Eternum Royal Academy. The crowd erupted into cheers, their excitement palpable. On the left side, Ella led her classmates in her leader's suit, confidently striding toward the arena. The students behind her waved their flag high, their spirits clearly lifted. And on our right, we have the dark horse of the competition, the Silverleaf Academy. The cheers grew louder, but then they began to fade as the crowd noticed something unsettling. Estria, the leader of Silverleaf Academy, was missing. The students from the Silverleaf Academy walked slowly to the arena, their heads down, and they didn't even bother to wave their flag. One would think that the way they were acting was pretty exaggerated, but no. For them, Estria was like their shining light, the one who took them out of a world full of darkness. Like a parental figure. Without him here, would it really matter if they won the competition or not? Seeing the lack of enthusiasm, the announcer tried to rally their spirits. Remember, any late student can still enter the competition as long as they step into the portal before all their classmates are eliminated. But his words didn't seem to have the desired effect, and he let out a resigned sigh. All right, everyone, please enter the portal. The crowd will be watching on the gigantic screens that will appear once each student steps inside. As the students began to enter the portal, multiple screens flickered to life, showcasing their faces. However, 2 much larger screens stood out from the rest. One displayed Ella, while the other was completely blank. It was supposed to show Estria's figure, but instead, it was just an empty space. Without further ado, let's begin the final battle to determine who is the strongest. The crowd cheered, though the energy wasn't quite as electric as before. It was astonishing to think that the absence of a single person could have such a profound impact on the atmosphere.
roar.
The moment Estria's sword clashed against the Bloodclaw wolf's crimson horn, the beast let out a furious roar, swinging its massive paw toward him.
Zing.
A giant clawed paw came hurtling at Estria, forcing him to sidestep to the left just in time.
Splurt.
But it was too late. The edge of the claw grazed his right shoulder, tearing through flesh and muscle. The Bloodclaw wolf's lips curled into a menacing snarl as its paw stretched out toward Estria once more.
Shing. Splurt. Arg.
Estrella screamed as the small wound on his shoulder ripped open wider, blood gushing out like a fountain, creating a dark stain on the ground beneath him. He gritted his teeth, a faint layer of mana enveloping his shoulder in a desperate attempt to stem the bleeding. He was about to retaliate when he noticed a pack of smaller wolves eyeing him hungrily. God damn it! He enveloped his sword in its usual silver color and swung at the wolves. But this time, it wasn't the same as before. Instead of a crescent wave of mana, he unleashed a piercing shot that punched a hole straight through one of the wolves. Then, he turned to the big wolf and dashed towards him. Growl! The small wolves together jumped in Estrella's direction upon seeing his intention to attack the big wolf, catching him off guard. He twisted his body mid-air, and then took the opportunity to increase the amount of mana in his sword, swinging it down.
Splurt.
Blood sprayed everywhere as he sliced through the smaller wolves, their bodies cleaved in half, leaving a gruesome scene behind. But what Estrella didn't notice was the massive wolf charging at him from the side.
Thram.
The big wolf swung his arm at him, giving a strong strike on Estrella's stomach region.
Kook.
Estrella's eyes widened spontaneously, and blood gushed out of his mouth. This body was blown away and flung onto a tall tree. Crash! The tree cracked in half as Estrella's body passed through it before it landed on the river nearby, splashing his whole body.
Ugh.
He stood up groaning faintly as he felt every part of his body aching in pain. Naturally, the big wolf didn't give Estrella time to rest before two attacks, in the form of a giant blood claw, came towards him. He bit his lip, dragging his battered body to the right just in time to avoid the attack.
But he was still careless. Crunch. Calf.
One of the nearby wolves successfully bit down on his injured shoulder, prompting him to let out a scream. He quickly grabbed the wolf's body and threw it on the ground before stabbing it with a sword.
Kag ha-ah.
His breath came down ragged as more and more wolves approached him. He wiped the blood from his lips, then, his eyes turned colder than before. I didn't think I'd be using this so soon, he muttered, exhaling a breath that came out in a misty cloud.
Through him.
Your aura attribute has been successfully awakened.
A panel popped in front of him.
His body was suddenly enveloped in a silver light, trembling slightly as the color deepened into a metallic lavender, a perfect mixture of violet and silver. And then, another papal appeared in front of him.
Aura's rank, S+.
Disposition, violet, power and luxury. Ignoring the panel, he cracked his neck and gripped the handle of his sword tightly. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art. Second move. Ice Lotus Barrage. A flurry of crescent slashes erupted in all directions, cutting through the wolves like they were made of paper. In an instant, Estrella's figure vanished, reappearing right in front of the massive wolf. A small smile crept onto his face as his red eyes glowed with intensity.
Through him.
Once again, his sword met the Bloodclaw wolf's horn, but this time, he felt no vibration in his arms. Instead, the impact sent the beast skidding back several meters.
Roar. Ah, shut up, will you?
Holding his neck, Estrella muttered coldly as he swung his sword. A violet line sliced through the air, and a group of nearby wolves fell lifelessly to the ground, blood spraying out like a fountain. Then, his sword transformed into a gun, and Estrella leaped into the air, a violet platform appearing beneath him to keep him aloft.
Die.
He uttered the word with chilling calmness, and a series of shots rang out. Mixed Ice Series, Magic Ice Bullet. Upgraded 3th level spell. Bang. 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 Each bullet found its way to the big wolf's body, but soon enough, the big wolf got smarter as it started zigzagging its way toward Estrella. He finally reached close to Estrella and opened its massive jaws wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth that glinted menacingly in the light. To his surprise, Estrella didn't even flinch upon seeing that. Instead, his finger pulled the trigger of the handgun. Bang! His mouth swallowed a significantly different bullet, and then, a chill filled his body as he froze before he could reach Estrella. Estrella transformed his gun back into a sword, ready to deliver the final blow. Swoop! He swung with all his might, but the wolf managed to leap back just in time, narrowly avoiding the strike. Estrella stopped his movements mid-air as he turned to look coldly at the wolf. Now his red eyes were glowing more than ever. Combined with those vertical slits, the big wolf couldn't help but feel a shiver running down its back. Creak! A chilling sound echoed through the air as waves of violet energy surged from Estrella's body, rippling across the ground like a dark tide. His sword dragged behind him, carving a small fissure into the earth as he slowly walked towards the massive Bloodclaw wolf. Through him! Growl! The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the weak growls of the smaller wolves filled the air. Their desperate attempts to reach Estrella were cut short by the deadly waves of mana that swept through them. However, he ignored them as his vertical slits blinked ominously as the smile on his face only seemed to increase. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art. A faint murmur came out of his lips, and hearing those words, the Bloodclaw wolf flinched in shock, instinctively taking a cautious step back.
But it was too late. Third move.
Moonlight's one flash. The dim light of the moon seemed to focus on Estria, illuminating him in a silver glow. A silver line sliced through the air, and in the blink of an eye, Estria vanished, reappearing behind the massive wolf. Crack! The red horn that the Bloodclaw wolf was so proud of was severed cleanly in half, crashing to the ground with a depressing sound. The wolf's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed into a furious glare as it leaped toward Estria, its rage boiling over.
Roar!
The beast roared, its voice echoing like thunder, as its blood claws expanded, becoming much larger than before. But Estria turned to face the beast, and in that moment, the wolf stared at his deep blood eyes. He felt a wave of pure
fear.
The emotion in Estria's eyes had drained, leaving behind a cold void that seemed to suck the warmth from the air.
And then, swing.
The wolf's claws suddenly felt heavy and useless. They began to dissolve into blood crystals that fell to the ground with a sickening thud.
Thud, thud, thud.
The Bloodclaw wolf trembled, its heart racing as it stared at the fallen crystals, realizing with horror that they were remnants of its own claws.
Ah!
At that moment, the named demon beast heard a small sigh coming out of the man's mouth. He pointed his sword at him, as he asked, "Who's hunting who?" He tilted his head, a bloodied smile stretching across his face, and at that instant, another streak of light flashed before the wolf's eyes. Growl! Accompanied by the fearful growl of the big wolf.
Boom!
Meanwhile, in the artificial dungeon, the Silverleaf Academy was being easily pushed back by the Eternum Royal Academy. The air crackled with energy, and the ground shook with the force of their spells. They had eliminated 3 students, but more than half of their classmates were already eliminated.
Damn it! Derek, dodge!
Mia shouted, her voice rising above the din as she spotted a streak of lightning hurtling toward him.
Ah!
Derek's eyes widened in panic. He quickly raised an earth wall behind him, the ground rumbling as it formed, and then he sprinted to the side, trying to evade the incoming attack. James, prepare for the strike. Mia added as 2 cyclones of flames appeared in her hands, and James nodded his head at her, stopping in his tracks. Earth Series, Iron Golem.
4th level spell.
From the ground, a massive golem emerged, and then charged forward, aiming to intercept the multiple attackers closing in on them. Then Mia raised her hands, having lost her staff, and the flame cyclones became more chaotic as the increasing wind surged. Fire Series, Twin Flame Cyclones.
4th level spell.
From her hands, she unleashed the spiraling flames toward the enemy students. But just as the fire surged forward, a sword flashed through the air.
Swing.
In an instant, the twin flame cyclones were sliced in half, the flames extinguished with a faint hiss. The sound of multiple thuds hitting the ground voiced out, and Mia's heart sank.
Damn it!
She bit her lip aggrievedly, not able to think about how to escape that situation. In front of her stood 5 familiar figures, the strongest students of the Eternum Royal Academy. It was Ella, their leader, Lucas, Rose and Maya and Iris. She realized at that moment that she was going to lose, but she still held on to the hope that Estria would appear to save the day. Just like he always did. Because of that reason, she was determined to give it her all until the very end. Closing her eyes gently, she sent a warning to Derek and James, the only 2 remaining beside her. With that, she raised her hands into the air, and her eyes began to glow intensely. Fire Series, Hell's Paradise. Upper 5th level spell.
Boom!
Suddenly, multiple currents of lava erupted from the ground, shooting toward the sky like fiery geysers. Rose's eyes widened in shock as she witnessed the sheer power of Mia's spell. Ella, use your strongest blow immediately. Rose warned Ella directly, and upon hearing her words, Ella's expression grew colder as she brought her sword close to her forehead. A golden light began to envelop her body, as golden flames erupted from it. Royal Swordsmanship, Flowing Golden Dragon. SS level sword arts. The flames twisted and coiled, transforming into a magnificent golden dragon that soared toward Mia, roaring with ferocity.
Roar! Damn it!
Mia's heart raced as she quickly turned the currents of lava into a protective barrier, desperately trying to shield herself from the impending attack. But just as she braced for impact, she felt a sudden force behind her.
Caulk!
The blow struck her back with bone-crushing force, sending her flying forward. She gripped the ground, trying to slow her momentum, and turned to look behind her. Both Derek and James had been eliminated, with Maya and Lucas looking at her. In the other side, Her spell had been completely shattered by the golden dragon. At this moment, her vision started blurring as she saw a magnificent wave of flames coming towards her.
Ah!
Mia fell to her knees. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself in a sad tone. We've lost, even with Estria's help, it's not enough. The words felt like a stone in her throat. She had hoped so hard that he would come and save them, but now, it seemed like a distant dream. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through her as the last attack hit her.
Ag!
She gasped, feeling her body being pulled away from the battlefield.
No! She cried out, but it was too late.
The world around her began to fade, and she felt herself being teleported out of the dungeon.
Why?
If I endured just a little more, maybe he would. She clenched her fists tightly and stood there, staring at the arena floor with a vacant gaze. But suddenly, the loud voice of the crowd reached out to her ears. The crowd was roaring loudly, their voices rising in a deafening chant.
Estria! 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 Mia's heart skipped a beat.
She blinked, and her eyes landed on the biggest screen in the arena. There, in the center of the chaos, stood a silver-haired young man. His glowing red eyes were sharp and focused, filled with a deep intensity that could send shivers down anyone's spine. But what caught her attention the most were his clothes. They were torn and tattered, hanging off him like rags. Dark stains of blood soaked through the fabric, oozing from multiple scratches and wounds that marred his skin. Each cut looked deep, and the blood glistened in the light, a stark contrast against his pale skin. It dripped down his arms and pooled at his feet, painting the ground a dark crimson. The sight was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. At that moment, tears welled up in Mia's eyes, blurring her vision. I knew you would appear.
What?
Weren't we supposed to get out now that Mia is eliminated? One of the students from the Eternum Royal Academy asked, confusion etched on his face. A few minutes had passed and they still didn't get teleported out of the practical dungeon.
I think so.
She was the last student from Silverleaf, right? Another spoke, glancing around at the others. The remaining students began to murmur among themselves, and even Ella and her group couldn't help but feel puzzled. But isn't it strange? Rose suddenly spoke up, her voice cutting through the chatter and catching everyone's attention. The moment Mia was eliminated, the usual notification that tells us how many students are left from the other academies still showed one.
Right.
Ella nodded, her brow furrowing in thought. After Lucas and Maya eliminated Derek, it said only one student was remaining. So we should have one, right? As her words hung in the air, everyone fell silent, deep in thought. Then Lucas muttered,
Unless.
Estria entered the dungeon just before Mia was eliminated.
Bang. Gaff.
Just as he finished speaking, a loud scream pierced the air, and in front of their eyes, one of the students disintegrated into wisps, their body vanishing as if it had never existed. They turned toward the sound of the gunshot, and there he was, a familiar young man with silver hair and glowing red eyes stepping into view. His clothes were in tatters, hanging off him like rags, soaked with dark stains of blood that oozed from deep gashes and scratches covering his skin. Each wound looked agonizingly deep, blood gushing from them and pooling at his feet, creating a gruesome sight.
Estria.
Ella gasped, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. It was clear that those injuries hadn't come from the practical dungeon. Just by looking at him, anyone could tell why Estria hadn't appeared in the second phase and only showed up now in the third. He had been busy fighting a powerful opponent. However, it wasn't time to worry about Estria. After all, they were still in the Academy's competition. Ella quickly shook her head and looked towards her teammates. Prepare to atta.
Splurt.
A violent spray of blood erupted as a silver line sliced through the air as if cutting through paper. In that instant, 4 students vanished into wisps, their screams echoing in the air before being silenced. Ella stammered, shock washing over her. She wasn't alone. Lucas, Rose, Maya, and Iris were equally stunned, their faces pale as they processed what had just happened. But each one of them quickly got out of their ways and prepared to attack Estria. Fire Series, Phoenix Rush, 6th level spell. Immediately, Rose raised her stuff and started preparing her strongest spell. Just by seeing that attack from Estria, she knew that he wasn't there to play around. Maya, let's go together. Lucas spoke to Maya, who nodded her head, her fists clenched tightly as they both dashed toward Estria like a bolt of lightning. At that moment, Estria, looking at the forming fire phoenix, slowly turned his head towards them and raised his sword.
Shing.
A silver crescent wave of mana shot toward them, but they didn't stop as a golden barrier suddenly materialized around them. Estria didn't seem surprised. He merely glanced at Iris, who had summoned the barrier.
Crack. What?
Lucas exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief as the crescent wave pierced through Iris's barrier like it was made of paper. Both Lucas and Maya instinctively tried to shield themselves from the incoming attack, panic flooding their senses. At that moment, from behind, a group of students tried to attack Estria, but he didn't even glance at them as he diagonally swung his sword.
Splurt.
A silver line cut through the air, and the students behind him were cleanly severed in half, their bodies collapsing to the ground before dissipating into wisps. Blood sprayed everywhere, painting the ground in a horrific crimson color.
But it didn't stop there.
The silver light surrounding Estria intensified, glowing with a fierce energy that crackled in the air.
First move.
Ice Lotus Bloom. An ice lotus formed above him, delicate yet deadly, as Estria swung his sword downwards. The moment the lotus reached the center of the remaining students, he clenched his fist tightly.
Bloom.
He uttered a single word, and then,
freeze.
A wave of bone-chilling cold surged through the forest, sweeping across the ground like a dark tide. It didn't take long for the icy blast to reach the students, and when it did, the temperature plummeted. The remaining students were caught off guard, their bodies instantly encased in ice. They gasped in shock, but it was too late. The ice shattered with a sickening crunch, and blood gushed out in a gruesome spray. The only ones left standing were Ella and her group, their faces pale with horror as they witnessed the brutal elimination of their classmates. On the outside, the crowd erupted in cheers, but amongst them, the students of the Silverleaf Academy were the loudest. Not to mention the high nobility. Did he get stronger in the span of a few days? Evelyn, the Northern Duchess, exclaimed in her same neutral expression. If she could manifest emotions, she probably would have a shocked face. Yeah, it seems so. Elenda, the Sword Duke, nodded his head in confirmation. Unlike Evelyn, he had shock splattered over his face, but beneath that, there was an undeniable hate for Estria. He had eliminated his dear grandson after all. To their reactions, Empress Isabella couldn't help but smile widely. This little guy seems like a perfect partner for Ella, no? She said, turning to face Francis, the Emperor. He frowned deeply, his expression darkening as he shot her a look that seemed to say, "You're still on that." "She's my dear daughter, and this Estria is just a commoner," he replied, shaking his head in disapproval before glaring at Isabella. Then, he leaned closer to her and whispered, "Don't forget your place, woman." Empress Isabella immediately clenched the hems of his dress as she heard his cold words. Although they appeared to be a perfect couple from the outside, the reality was quite different. The Emperor was a very lustful man, with countless mistresses, and he often neglected Isabella. She had been forced into marriage with him due to his obsession with her in their earlier years. However, right after their wedding ceremony, he suddenly lost interest in her. They never conceived even once during their marriage. Isabella was the daughter of the previous empress, and Francis doted on her because he had loved his late wife very dearly. However, he also threatened Isabella, insisting that she act like the perfect wife so that his image as emperor would not be tarnished. Despite this, Isabella genuinely treated Ella as her own daughter, but she received no recognition or appreciation from Francis. "Oh, would you look at that?" Evelyn muttered softly, and immediately, everyone's eyes were drawn back to the big screen.
BKM.
Both Lucas and Maya were sent flying through the air, their bodies crashing down before Ella caught them just in time.
Gah, this guy.
Lucas coughed, blood spilling from his lips as he clutched his chest, his breaths coming out in ragged gasps.
Ack.
Maya groaned, holding her stomach as she limped on the ground, pain etched across her face. Immediately, Iris rushed over to them, her hands glowing with a soft light as she conjured a healing spell.
"Hang in there, guys. I'm almost done."
Rose called out, but just then, Estria's figure vanished from sight. And Ella's eyes immediately traced it as she dashed towards Rose.
Clang.
Ella's sword clashed against Estria's right in front of Rose, whose eyes went wide with shock.
Ack.
Ella grunted, trying to push Estria back, but he stood firm, slowly forcing her to retreat. "Guys, help!"
Rose shouted.
She really couldn't do anything because she was still preparing the spell, and needed to focus all of her mana on the spell. In other words, she was a living target.
Clang.
Lucas swung his sword at Estria from the side, but Estria simply lowered his body and deflected the blow with the handle of his sword, handling both Ella's and Lucas's sword at the same time. However, there was still one missing person who had been buffed by Iris's spell.
Ha-ah.
Maya shouted as she threw a punch, her fist enveloped in a deep surge of mana. But at that moment, as soon as her punch met Estria's body, his body turned into mist.
Oh no.
The force of Lucas's sword swing sent Maya crashing into Ella, splitting her in half before she could react. Blood sprayed everywhere, gushing from her body as she fell to the ground before dissipating into wisps.
Quaff.
Ella was sent flying backward, her body slamming into a tree with a sickening crack. The impact shattered the trunk, and she continued to fly through the air, breaking more trees in her path, blood trickling from her mouth. Fortunately, Rose wasn't attacked or anything, and her spell was finally complete.
Phoenix Rush.
She screamed loudly as her staff glowed brighter than ever. Immediately, a fire phoenix erupted from her staff, soaring toward Estria like a blazing wind, making everything on its way catch on fire. But Estria remained calm, and simply raised his sword. Second move. Ice Lotus Barrage. A barrage of crescent waves of mana shot toward the phoenix, each one being stronger than the last one. Initially, Rose thought that soon enough the crescent waves would stop because seemed to consume a lot of mana, but they didn't. Each one struck the phoenix, weakening it further until, just a few meters from Estria, the fire phoenix completely dissipated into dust. D-damn, how much mana do you have? Rose gritted her teeth, breathing heavily, frustration and fear mixing in her chest. She had spent all of her mana on that same move, but surprisingly, it was easily taken down by Estria. To her words, Estria didn't say anything, keeping the same sharp and cold expression. He looked towards Lucas, then to Ella, and finally to Rose again. This are the heroes that eventually are going to save the world? Do they have a hidden technique or something? Estria pondered to himself. When he first arrived in this world, he believed he could challenge just one of them and perhaps be evenly matched with him or her. But now, all of them together didn't muster a chance against him. But I'm still going to keep my guard up. After all, both Ella and Lucas didn't use a single of their techniques. Maybe, their powers come more from their techniques, and not raw skill.
He took a step forward.
They can't be so weak. Meanwhile, outside the arena, a stunning woman with long purple hair and her signature purple witch hat gazed intently at the big screen. Her light blue eyes were fixed on the silver-haired young man. Estria. He released his aura, she muttered to herself, her brow furrowing in concern as she bit her lip. That guy. Didn't I tell him that if he kept his aura sealed, the attacks wouldn't come so frequently? Why did he choose to unleash it now? She brought her hand to her mouth, biting her nails in anxiety. Especially since his aura contains two of the strongest dispositions, and his personality. It's going to change under its influence. Her gaze remained locked on Estria's figure, noting how his expression had shifted from his casual smile to something colder and more intense. He's not even smiling while fighting anymore. She whispered, clutching her witch's hat tightly, her heart heavy with concern. Then, she looked down at her legs, where a small piece of paper with Estria's name marked on it could be seen. There, a particular detail stood out. Danger, world-destroying level. This little guy has an incredible affinity for both mana and aura, he truly is a monster. However, there's still Lucas, the hero of our era. She tapped her legs lightly, her expression thoughtful. As the strongest mage, she could easily pry to wherever she wanted, so it was no surprise that she knew about Lucas's true identity. As soon as Lucas gets the holy sword, his power should skyrocket. Then, Estria won't stand a chance against him, even with his incredible talent. A smile crept onto her lips as she imagined the scene of Estria being defeated by Lucas.
That scenes.
She sighed dreamily, her cheeks flushing with excitement. At that moment, he won't have any choice but to come to me, she let out a giggle, clutching her witch hat happily. If one saw her face in that state, they would their jaw dropped. After all, Eleonora, the strongest mage in the world and the headmistress of the Eternum Royal Academy, was blushing deeply at the thought of a student. Taking a step forward, Estria's silver mana began to convulse around him, sending clumps of dirt and debris flying into the air. At the four remaining students, his eyes immediately focused on Iris, the only supporter of their team. Gah! Iris gasped, jumping back in shock as Estria's icy eyes bore into her. Without hesitation, Lucas stepped in front of Iris. Demon-slaying sword art.
Devastation sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship, A. Lucas knew that the weakest move of his technique wouldn't do much damage to Estria, so he decided to use the second one directly. In that instant, dark flames erupted from his body, swirling around him and forming a massive vortex that crackled with intensity. Then, he dashed towards Estria and swung his sword with all his might. Clang! Their swords collided, and the dark flames clung to Estria's blade, trying to consume his silver mana. But to Lucas's shock, the flames didn't eat his silver mana. Instead, they began to freeze, transforming into a layer of ice that coated Estria's sword. Lucas's eyes widened in disbelief. His dark flames had always devoured everything in their path, but they couldn't touch Estria's mana.
Slip.
At that moment, Lucas's sword slipped into the ground, piercing it, and before he could react, Estrella pressed the palm of his hand into Lucas's chest.
No.
His face contorted in shock as he remembered the past scene of Estrella doing the same thing to Leon. But just as Estrella was about to strike, a massive golden light flashed before his eyes. Royal Swordsmanship, Heavenly Strike. SS-level swordsmanship. Immediately, his instincts kicked in, and Estrella pushed Lucas back slightly, raising his sword to block the incoming attack.
Clang.
Their swords met with a deafening crash, sparks flying as Estrella's feet sank into the ground from the force of the impact.
Bam.
And as the golden light flickered, sending a shockwave that created a small crater beneath Estrella, the ground cracking and splintering with each passing second. Taking the opportunity, Iris buffed both Lucas and Ella, making Lucas's flames flare back to life, as his sword was now enveloped in dark flames once more. Demon-slaying sword art. Breaking the sky. A+ level swordsmanship. The third move of his technique. Now, the dark flames had a faint blue tint as Lucas swung them in Estrella's direction. Suddenly, a massive force surged toward Estrella, and Ella seized the opportunity to use Estrella's blocking sword to jump on it and leap away from there.
Through him.
The attack came on his way, creating an incoming fissure on the ground. Seeing this, Estrella's stance shifted slightly as he bent down his lower body. Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art.
Third move.
Moonlight's one flash. As the enormous cyclone of dark flames charged at him, Estrella's body vanished from sight, and a silver line sliced through the air.
Shing.
In that instant, the silhouette of the moon emerged in the sky, illuminating Estrella's form as he reappeared behind the incoming attack.
Hiss.
The dark flames dissipated, being cleanly cut in half.
Ah, that was a difficult one.
For the first time, Estrella spoke, as he waved his right arm slightly, feeling the mana vessel convulse slightly. It had broken, and now he couldn't use his right arm if he wanted to avoid injuries. Looking ahead, he noticed the shocked expressions of the small group. It was no surprise, given that Lucas's attack had been incredibly powerful, even capable of dealing great damage to a named demon beast. Though it might appear that Estrella came out from the attack unscathed, that wasn't entirely the truth. He had expended a significant amount of mana using the third move of his sword art. Additionally, he had broken the mana vessel, which was supposed to last for a day or so, even with the use of his third move. But suddenly,
beep,
the five of them got teleported out of the practical dungeon.
Ha!
Estrella muttered confused. And he wasn't the only one. Iris, Ella, and Lucas were equally confused. Before they could gather their thoughts, the announcer's voice boomed over the arena. Estrella, the leader of Silverleaf Academy, has been disqualified for using an unauthorized artificial mana vessel. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Estrella's heart sank. Because of that, Silverleaf Academy is deemed last in the competition and declared the weakest academy once again. And of course, the Eternum Royal Academy is declared the strongest academy for the 10th consecutive year.
What?
The crowd erupted in outrage and disbelief.
An artificial mana vessel?
Did Estrella get injured and have to use that?
But how is it unauthorized?
Did he get it on the black market or something? The crowd started whispering to each other. This whole situation came as a shock, and Estrella froze, shock coursing through him. Immediately, the students from Eternum Royal Academy began to celebrate, their cheers ringing in his ears. Ella's group was quickly surrounded by their classmates, who hoisted them into the air, showering them with compliments and cheers. As for the Silverleaf Academy, the students gathered around Estrella. It's okay, next year we can still win. Yeah, don't worry about it, Estrella. The students tried to cheer him, even Mia pressed her gigantic breasts against his back as she whispered softly in his ear. Don't worry about it, I'll give you a reward for still arriving in time. Even though we lost, everyone knows you're the strongest here, which means our academy is the strongest. However, to her words, Estrella remained silent, clenching his fists deeply. His wounds still had blood, and Mia had dirted her clothes with blood, but she didn't seem to mind at all.
Estrella.
Vivian whispered his name in a soft voice. She was the only one who seemed to know how Estrella was feeling. All his hard work, training, and everything.
For him to be disqualified.
And knowing Estrella, Vivian was sure that the artificial mana vessel wasn't from the black market, and was probably made by himself.
Ha!
He let out a bitter scoff, pushing his hair back into a messy slicked-back style, strands falling over his forehead and eyes. Unauthorized artificial mana vessel? His voice was sequentially amplified by mana as he uttered those words. Who are you kidding? In a sudden burst of anger, he drew his sword and traced a deep line across his right arm.
Estria.
His classmates called out, but he signaled them to stop. Then, he continued to cut into his skin until the line was deep and wide, blood gushing out and dripping to the ground. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed the broken mana vessel and snapped his fingers with his left hand, conjuring a massive screen in the air. The image of the mana vessel appeared, along with his full name written across it. It meant that the mana vessel had been created by him, therefore, it wasn't unauthorized since he was the one who created it. At that moment, the crowd's complaints only got louder.
SEE.
I knew it, Estria wouldn't cheat like that.
Yeah, that's right. Redo the match. Redo. Redo.
A cold sweat trickled down the announcer's forehead as he glanced nervously at the Emperor, who was watching with a stern expression. Then, the Emperor stood up, his voice booming over the crowd. Even though the mana vessel was created by you, it's still considered an unfair advantage, making you lose the round regardless. Or do you have an opinion against me? The moment those words left his lips, a crushing pressure descended upon Estria, forcing him to his knees.
Ugh.
He coughed, blood spilling from his mouth, and splattering onto the ground.
Estria.
His classmates shouted his name in worry but decided not to act to avoid being targeted by the Emperor. They knew that Estria wouldn't like them getting hurt.
Ha.
In response to the Emperor's words, Estria only seemed to let out a small laugh, as he formulated a small plan in mind. He had a way to make sure that the Emperor couldn't act against him. So, he took the liberty to say his real thoughts. Do you even know what a mana vessel is for? A smile formed on his lips as he directly insulted the Emperor. The Emperor's expression darkened the moment Estria's words echoed across the arena. A visible vein pulsed on Francie's forehead, his fingers gripping the armrest of his throne so tightly that the wood beneath her began to creak.
Such insolence.
He muttered, his voice brimming with rage. The air around him grew heavy, suffused with a suffocating pressure that made the crowd fall silent. Estria, still on his knees under the crushing force of her aura, raised his head slightly. Despite the blood dripping from his mouth and the visible strain on his body, a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. A mana vessel, as its name suggests, serves as a substitute for a mana channel or vein. It can be used when a mana vein is fractured or simply absent. However, the quality of a mana vessel cannot match that of a real mana vein. Estria began to explain, completely disregarding Francis's comments. Even if some of them may store high-level magical spells, it doesn't apply to me because I utilized a swordsman ability, not a mage ability. Therefore, Your Majesty. He paused and gave Francis a smirking glance. I cannot be eliminated for such reason, even if I need to say that I do have an opinion against you. But he wasn't done, as he lifted his head and stared directly into the Emperor's eyes. Then, Your Majesty, could you explain why I was disqualified, aside from the blatant favoritism towards the Royal Academy? The moment those words rang out, the atmosphere seemed to have turned even colder than before. The crowd started whispering to each other, having different opinions. But interestingly, both Evelyn and Empress Isabella seemed to be in accord with Estria's opinion. They both looked at Estria with a look that was oddly approving, almost as if they understood exactly what he was doing. But no one dared to say anything out loud. The Emperor clenched his fists tightly as he noticed the public's reaction. His image had just declined, and if a journalist were present, they would undoubtedly seize the opportunity to further tarnish his reputation.
Ah, this useless Emperor.
I had almost forgotten that he's in a pact with Lilith, the succubus queen. Estria sighed inwardly. Like in every hero against a Demon King novel, the Demon King had 7 demon generals, each representing one of the 7 deadly sins. One of these generals was Lilith, who obviously embodied the sin of lust. In the early chapters, the author revealed tons of hints for the future, and one of them was about the Emperor's pact with Lilith. This was also the reason why Emperor Francis did not have relations with the Empress Isabella. Isabella possessed what was called a sanctified soul, which could not be corrupted. So, if the Emperor were to engage in relations with her, he would suffer fatal consequences alongside Lilith. However, Lilith only discovered that the Emperor was about to have relations with Empress Isabella on the night of their marriage. As for why the Emperor made a pact with Lilith, Estria hadn't read that part yet. It seems that I'll be the one taking the job of getting his head. Estria declared inwardly. He didn't know if in the novel, the Emperor was truly killed or his pact with Lilith was broken, but he honestly didn't care. He had considered various ways to escape in case he was declared a traitor or something similar. Although Estria's actions might have seemed reckless, he had already thought through all his options in case he truly offended the Emperor. Some of those options included fleeing to another kingdom or accepting the headmistress of the Royal Academy's proposal, among other possibilities. He felt confident based on the basic knowledge he had of the novel's plot. As for the Emperor, he remained silent while thoughtfully gazing at Estria. It seemed that he was seriously considering his words. "I'll overlook this offense for now," Francis finally spoke, his voice booming across the arena with cold authority. "But if you challenge me again..." His eyes glinted with a dangerous, murderous intent. "I won't show mercy." Estria couldn't help but smirk inwardly at the Emperor's threat. As for the competition, the Emperor's gaze swept over the crowd. The results will remain the same. Student Estria could have registered his mana vessel before entering the practical dungeon.
This fucker.
Is that clear? The Emperor's voice dropped to a cold, dangerous tone as he looked directly at Estria. The pressure in the air grew heavier, pressing down on him. At that moment, Estria was about to retaliate when he suddenly felt a pair of soft hands landing on his shoulders.
Estria.
Vivian called out his name in a soft tone.
You have no choice. Be thankful.
His Majesty has already forgiven you. Estria froze for a moment, his anger still bubbling inside him, but Vivian's words made him pause. He glanced at her and seeing the concern in her eyes.
Sigh.
He sighed before nodding slightly, though his expression remained tense. "I'll make sure I'm the one getting your head." But of course, he wouldn't let this slide. "Master?" Upon reaching my hotel room, I immediately lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I honestly still had to go and meet up with the Saintess. But I was too mentally tired for that. I fought for I don't know how many hours straight and even created a mana vessel for my right arm. Unfortunately, it's broken. "Master?" "So, I need to meet the Saintess as soon as possible because I'll need her aid in healing my mana vein once again. Not to mention, the student exchange program will be happening in a week or so. And I'll need to be attending the Eternum Royal Academy as one of their students. Gosh. Why did I have to be the one being picked? I'm too lazy to deal with those arrogant pricks."
"Master." What?"
Lumi's voice was suddenly much louder, snapping me completely out of my thoughts.
I blinked, then blinked again.
Then, I turned to look at her, only to find her standing there. Completely naked. My face immediately flushed. "What the hell, Lumi?" She glanced down at herself with an embarrassed look.
"My clothes,"
she said softly, realizing she was still in her usual naked state. She then quickly looked back at me, clearly unsure how to react.
Right.
"I completely forgot," I muttered, rubbing my face in embarrassment. Every time I transformed Lumi into a sword, her clothes would get torn apart in the process. It was something I was used to by now, but it still slipped my mind from time to time. Because of that, I bought special mana strings for clothes. This way, the clothes wouldn't shatter the moment Lumi was transformed into a sword or a gun. I just forgot to give them to Lumi. With a small sigh, I stood up and walked over to my drawer. "I've got something for you," I said, pulling out a set of clothes made from mana strings. I had even remembered to grab underwear, just in case. Lumi's face lit up, and she nodded excitedly.
"Thank you, Master."
She wasted no time, quickly starting to get dressed in her new clothes. Those mana strings were really useful, it just needed a basic spell to clean them completely, and if she wanted to have different clothes, she just needed to insert mana while thinking about an outfit. Unfortunately, they were really expensive. But of course, Lumi deserves the best. "Master, do I look cute?" she asked, suddenly appearing right in front of me with a playful little jump. She spun around, showing off her new outfit with a huge smile. I couldn't help but smile back. "Lumi looks adorable." I gave her head a soft pat, unable to hold back a smile. "Hee hee," she giggled happily, her eyes shining with joy. It was just at that moment that I forgot about taking a bath. My eyes immediately turned to the bed and...
Shit.
Without wasting a second, I immediately spammed clean magic on it. "Lumi, I'm going to take a bath. You can play for now," I said, tapping her head twice before making my way to the bathroom.
Yay!
To my surprise, when I entered the bathroom, the bathtub was already filled with warm water, and a few scent flowers had been placed around it. It looked like someone had been thoughtful. Maybe Lumi had set it up? Or was it just the hotel staff? I shrugged and quickly undressed before stepping into the tub.
This feels great.
The water was really warm and felt thoroughly refreshing. The scent of the flowers seemed to ease my mind as I closed my eyes. Eternum Royal Academy, It was divided into 5 years, with each year having multiple courses and countless classes. Thinking about it, I don't know what kind of course I'm going to choose. Mana application, mana control, summoning classes, fighting classes.
There were plenty to choose from.
Even though it's just going to be a semester there.
I should have as much fun as I can, right?
I mean, if I accidentally blew up one of the classrooms, they'd probably expel me from the student exchange program, right?
MHM.
I'm going to be able to meet the other main characters, although they all are women. From that crazy sword instructor to that student council president.
That Lucas, huh?
He's really lucky. Anyways, if I'm really going to attend the same academy as the main characters, I might as well have as much fun as I can. Name, Estrella Moon, 20. Identity, strongest student of the weakest academy, the Moonlight Swordsman, the one who loves the goddess of the moon, the strongest student, new, exchange student of the Eternum Royal Academy, new.
Affinities, Ice. Aura, S+. Mana, B. Strength, C+. Vitality, C+. Agility, A. Spirit, S. Skills and talents.
1 Moonlit Ice Lotus Sword Art S. Active self-created skill. 2 Judgment IS. Active self-created skill. 3 Perfect Memory, unranked, passive talent. 4 Combat Instinct, B-, passive talent. 5 Sword and Gun Mastery mutated.
A. Passive skill. 6 Calm Mind, C. Passive talent.
7 Blood Eyes, unranked, your eyes ominously glow red.
Plus. Damn it.
To think that a month has already passed since I came here.
Life really is tough.
The week before the student exchange program had already passed. During that time, I decided not to train, and instead spent most of the time hanging around with my classmates and actually having fun. We went to amusement parks, to the Beast Zoo, or even an aqua park. It was also my birthday a few days ago. And of course, I made sure to visit Saintess Christina. She made sure to visually abuse me.
Her gaze. Too scary.
That aside, my right arm's mana vein was successfully healed by her. As expected of the Saintess, huh? So yeah, everything was alright.
Except, are you alright?
Do you need a doctor or something?
Ah yeah.
The person besides me. Someone who was as significantly important as Lucas, the protagonist of the novel. Looking at the newspaper in front of me, I then glanced at her, who was leisurely drinking a cup of tea while keeping her gaze on the outside of the train. Violet von Luxuria. People in the community often called her the final villainess. I didn't know why, but that nickname alone made me know that she was trouble. Not to mention, that she was the last person that I wanted to meet. How did I even end up traveling in the same cabin as her? Why was this train bound to have 2 people cabins? Seriously, why did I buy the economic ticket?
I knew it.
I should have bought a first-class ticket. No, why is she even traveling in the economic class? She is the sole heir to the prestigious Luxuria family, the richest family in the whole kingdom. Why would she ride economic? I really don't get rich people. Did I also mention that she is the student council president? Like, don't you have enough authority already? I sighed inwardly. Well, not like I care about it. I'm only going to stay at their academy for a single semester, then I'd finally be free to return to my academy and meet up with my classmates. MHM, so you're Estrella Moon. Suddenly, I heard a voice calling out my name and glanced at my side. Having her cup of tea on the small table in front of her, she was now holding a pair of files, and one of them contained my name as well as my appearance. I didn't expect you to be the student from the exchange program, she muttered softly, bringing the cup of tea to her lips before taking a sip. Neither did I. This was one of the things I expected to happen.
Well, don't worry about it.
She put down the files on the table, turning to me with a small smile. If you need anything, just talk with this big sister. Why was this scene so familiar? I simply stared at her for a brief moment. Sigh, and here I thought that I would get a cute junior. Furrowing her eyebrows, she sighed dramatically, before her expression softened into a smile. I assume that you still don't know which classes to take? She started a conversation once again. Not really.
Really?
Then, I'll briefly explain the best ones for you, considering your file of course. The last part of her words seemed really weird. Her casual tone had changed into a business tone as she uttered the last part of her words. You're pretty adept in swordsmanship, but you seem to be a magic swordsman. So the best choices for you should be Professor Ziva classes, and... With that, she started having a small conversation with me. She was basically explaining every one of the most important classes to me, considering my file of course. Amongst them, she firstly mentioned Professor Ziva, that goddamn crazy instructor. She was the swordsmanship instructor and also one of the heroines, albeit it was mentioned by the readers. In the chapter that I read, I didn't see many lovely interactions between her and Lucas. It's an academy novel, so she's definitely a heroine. That's everything.
She finally stopped. So?
What class did you take an interest in? Hearing her words, I had a quite thoughtful expression. Because I'm quite adept at getting into trouble, I should get a strong professor to protect me. My first thought was naturally Ziva. But I honestly don't want to meet up with her. From the community, I saw plenty of comments that she easily fell in love with Lucas because of his extraordinary talent. Not to mention that her scenes with Lucas were spicy to say the least. She was an absolute S. So yeah, I didn't want to risk getting involved with her, one way or another. As for the other classes, there were a few more that I was interested in, but of course the professor of that class was actually the headmistress herself. Apparently, in the last week before the student exchange program, she decided to have a change of heart and appointed herself as the Magic Theory Application Control. And everything else related to magic, as the professor. That woman. She must have decided that as soon as she received the news that I was the student chosen for the student exchange program. Unfortunately, Ziva was a no-go, so yeah, probably magic application and control. I finally replied to the student council president.
Ah, really?
That's amazing. I'm also registered on those. I mean, who wouldn't want to have classes from the strongest mace herself? She spoke energetically, letting out a small smile. Yay, I'm so happy. She's acting quite strange actually. Is it because I have a special color in me? Violet's unique ability was called 7 Colors Eye, which compared to my Judgment Eye, was much better. Just like my eye's ability, she could also discern if one was evil or not. But it could also read emotions, very precisely. For example, if she detected a pink color in your body, it meant that you loved her. If you had a black color, it meant that you hated her.
Things like that.
I'm curious though. What kind of color does she see in me? Honestly, it should be a mixture of gray and light red. Neutral but wary of. Although I do want to avoid her, my emotions towards her aren't something like hate or things like that. She's just someone that I absolutely wouldn't want to be close with. Ah, we've finally arrived. Looking out the window, the majestic view of the Eternum Royal Academy came to my eyes. An academy that was the same size as a city. It was more than 50 times the size of my academy, if not more. After getting off the train, Violet accompanied me to the entrance gate, but suddenly she stopped as the wind swept her long hair to the right. Welcome to Eternum Royal Academy. The student council president smiled brightly as she spread her arms wide. Gosh. That must be embarrassing.
Really?
I muttered as I got the notice that there was an entrance ceremony at the beginning of the semester. That isn't very pleasant. I made my way to the outdoor plaza and found a spot to sit among the other students. There were special seats set aside for the exchange students, but nah, I wasn't in the mood to be singled out. I'm comfortable here. Well, the ceremony began with a small speech from the headmistress, which was as boring as I expected. She kept meeting my gaze, but I had to get used to it. Not like I could hide from her, given that I was in a new place where everyone seemed to already know who I was. But it was her final words that caught me off guard. That's everything. Now, as usual, we will conduct the mana evaluation test. She clapped her hands, and immediately, the space around us seemed to swirl as if the air itself was moving. Out of nowhere, several orbs appeared, floating above a table on the podium. Another set of orbs appeared on a second table beside it.
All right.
The headmistress smiled at the crowd. Come out 5 at a time when your name is called. And just like that, the mana evaluation began. The first 5 students made their way to the podium as the headmistress explained how the orbs worked. This small orb is a device designed to measure the quality and quantity of mana within your body. All you need to do is hold it and allow the mana to flow into the orb. Once you do, your grade will be displayed for everyone to see, featuring both quality and quantity rankings. As I've mentioned many times before, your rank will determine your current position in the academy. However, this only applies to magicians. If you are a swordsman or a physical warrior, there is another orb to my right, and you will follow the same procedure with that orb. For those of you who are magic swordsmen, you have the option to choose one of the orbs or both. Your final grade will be based on the combined ranks. And with that, the mana evaluation began. 3 lines of students were formed, the left one for magicians, the right one for swordsmen, and the middle one for magic swordsmen. As for me, I placed myself last in the magic category. I shouldn't reveal my aura for now. After getting into their proper positions, the first batch of students started to infuse their mana into the orbs. The orbs glowed with different colors depending on their element. If they had multiple elements, the second color would show up a few moments later.
Thinking about it,
I still didn't awaken my second affinity. Since I was primarily focused on swordsmanship, I never considered awakening another magic affinity. Most of the time, I simply used my ice attribute to enchant my sword or to conjure mana-infused bullets with a freezing effect. I should try to awaken another one. But that will be expensive, no? But that aside, as the students finished channeling their mana into the orb and released it, a large panel appeared displaying each student's name alongside their respective grades. Mike Ox, 19 years old. Very much greater than mana quantity, C. Very much greater than mana quality, B. Very much greater than overall grade, C+.
Oh.
It seems that they value quality over quantity. That meant that my rank would be much higher than I originally thought, since when I trained my mana, I didn't focus on quantity, but quality. It had reached a terrifying level. One strand of mana for me should be worth more than 50 for an average mage. But yeah, I'll still get a big drawback for my mana quantity being so low. The mana evaluation continued without interruption, and surprisingly, no student received an overall grade lower than C, whether they were magicians or swordsmen. As expected of the best academy, huh? Then, the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. Ella, Lucas, Maya, Iris, and Rose were called up to the podium. I wanted to see how much they evolved from the academy's competition. It had only passed a week or so, but it was during this week that all of them found an inheritance dungeon together. So, their overall ranks would be increased by a whole rank or more. The kind of opportunity that is reserved for the main characters, I'd say. Ella, Lucas, and Maya went to the swordsman area, while Iris and Rose headed to the magician's side. They each placed their hands on the orbs, and before long, their results flashed across the screen. Both Maya and Iris got the same overall grade, B+. As for the other three, their results were monstrous, to say the least. Lucas Hurst won, 20 years old.
Aura quantity, B+.
Very much greater than aura quality, A++. Very much greater than overall grade, A+. An A+ rank is something that normal students would only achieve in their final year, but Lucas achieved it in the third year, with only 2 more years remaining. But of course, against demons, Lucas was more than 3 times stronger, so his rank would be around S or A++ in reality. And it seems that his other attribute other than light is lightning. One being a special element, and the other being a deviant. Truly a protagonist. But his second element. Did he awaken it a few days ago? I didn't see him use lightning against me in the competition. Ella Rosewood, 20 years old. Very much greater than aura quantity, A. Very much greater than aura quality, A++. Very much greater than overall grade, A+. The same grade as Lucas, but anyone could see that she was stronger in both quality and quantity. But she does possess the royal swordsmanship, so like Lucas, her power should reach the lower grades of S. Rose Firefly, 20 years old. Very much greater than mana quantity, A+. Very much greater than mana quality, A++. Very much greater than overall grade, A++. And then there was Rose, who blew everyone away.
A++?
She was ridiculously strong. But even with that, she didn't quite make it to S rank. Each one of them made the students from the 5th year pale in comparison, not to mention the shocked voices from the crowd. Grades A+ and A++? Wow! Are they really third-year students? They really are monsters. The whispers continued. Gosh! If there was a student like this in my academy, I would be more than happy.
Right.
There's Mia and Maria, although they still are much weaker than them. A few months ago, both of them were ranked B+, so they should be an A by now. As for Derek and James, maybe in a few months or not, both of them have this innate competitiveness between each other. And from what I saw, both of them are already at the B+ rank for mana, so yeah. It shouldn't be much of a problem for them to reach the next rank. More and more students got their evaluation, and I couldn't really see a familiar face other than Lucas and his group. The middle section was almost empty now, especially since there were no more magic swordsmen left. And then, I finally noticed a familiar face. Violet rose to the podium. She nodded towards the headmistress and carefully placed her hands on the small orb, closing her eyes. Unlike the other students, her hair began to flutter as a bright purple glow illuminated her beautiful face.
A purple-colored element.
That's her unique element, called crystal. This element could be easily described: the hardness of the rock element and the sharpness of the ice element.
Really unfair.
The crystal element can be considered even more powerful than the light element, especially since only Violet possesses it. While angels possess the light element, Lucas is the only human who has it. However, as I mentioned, Violet is the only one with the crystal element. Aside from the Demon King and the Evil God, the author needed a more human-like villain, so it makes sense why she is so special.
And her results. Even I was shocked.
Violet von Luxuria, 21 years old. Very much greater than mana quantity, S. Very much greater than mana quality, S++. Very much greater than overall grade, S+. A full-fledged S-rank magician, being only 21 years old.
Damn.
As expected of the student council president. For sure, she easily is the strongest student in the academy.
Yeah.
It's strange how she didn't participate in the competition. Estri would definitely be easily defeated by her.
Nah.
If I used my aura, I probably could beat her. The only problem that I do have in mind is how I died, or why did I disappear from the novel? Maybe I was too overpowered and the author simply let my character disappear? That could be the cause actually. But pushing that aside, it was finally my turn to step onto the podium. It was strange though. There was only one table, with just one orb on it. I looked around and realized I was the last one left. Oh, the disappointment on their faces is going to be huge. Estria, it's your turn. The headmistress called my name, smiling gently. I really want to see how far you've come. She snapped her fingers, and in an instant, the orb on the table was swapped out for another one.
A much bigger one. This woman.
I guess she's the strongest mage for a reason. I slowly placed my hands on the orb. A deep, icy blue light began to glow and shine on my face. But that wasn't all. The light grew stronger and brighter with each passing second, and my hair started to flutter from the gust of wind created by the energy. Then, little by little, the results began to show up on the big screen. Estria Moon, 20 years old. Very much greater than mana quantity, D+.
PFFF.
The crowd burst into laughter when they saw my painfully low mana level. It was as bad as I expected, maybe even worse.
Ha ha ha.
I can't believe the so-called Moonlight Swordsman has only a D+ rank for his mana quantity. He's worse than our weakest student. Typical of someone from the weakest academy, huh? They started laughing aloud, and even Lucas and his group had a strange expression splattered all over their faces. They had fought against me after all, so they should be quite surprised.
Ha!
I let out a cold breath as I opened my eyes, and suddenly, a strange pressure started falling on the student's shoulders. And it was at that moment that my mana quality finally appeared.
This.
How C could he? Gulp. How C could he have such high mana quality? And not even high-ranking mages have that kind monstrous quality. The laughter died in their throats.
They were speechless.
None of them dared to laugh anymore. And that's when I took a look at my own mana quality. Estria Moon, 20 years old. Very much greater than mana quantity, D. Very much greater than mana quality, SS++. Very much greater than overall grade, B.
It was terrifying, to say the least.
This battle suit is way too tight.
Right?
I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Why did the academy suddenly change the battle suits anyway? A few students were talking amongst themselves as we all stood around. The mana evaluation test concluded with my unexpectedly high mana quality, and the dungeon experience test was next. Not going to lie, it had been a long time since I had entered a dungeon. I had been busy either protecting my classmates or earning more money, which left me little time to explore. Additionally, dungeons weren't necessarily the best way to make money, so I focused on hunting high-ranking demon beasts instead. I even participated in a competition while hiding my face, all to obtain more high-ranking demon beast cores. Thinking back, it was during that time that I received the title of Moonlight Swordsman. I don't really get where they got the moonlight part from, but I appreciated the title nonetheless. It's a title that isn't exactly important for me, but for someone else. Someone very special.
Ahem.
I snapped back to reality as Eleonora, the headmistress, stepped forward to explain the dungeon test. Now that everyone is here, let's keep this simple. In front of you is a portal to a B-rank unexplored dungeon, which means its territory is unknown. Your task will be to explore the dungeon and gather as much information as you can, including details about the monsters and strategies for clearing it. The group of students, or the individual student, who collects the most vital information will receive a perfect grade. As for the others, Grades will be assigned based on the information they provide. Eleonora finally finished explaining about the test. She also didn't forget to steal a glance at me. Before anyone enters, please register your group here, she announced, snapping her fingers to make a large board appear. With that, the first group of students wrote their names on the board, and their names shimmered lightly before a small device materialized in their hands. This device is a recognition system designed to help you gather information about the specified monsters. Simply place a small amount of blood on it, and it will automatically identify the species. However, for the other details, you'll need to write them down yourself. Once you have registered your groups, you can enter the dungeon directly. Good luck. As soon as those words echoed, chaos erupted as the students rushed toward the board. They were clearly very competitive against each other. However, I wasn't really waiting for anything. I couldn't care less about this test, and I only participated in the mana evaluation because revealing my results would be more than enough for me to skip the remaining tests. As for my rank, I could simply switch my ranks with anyone during the dueling season. So yeah. One by one, groups entered the dungeon, leaving me completely alone. Surprisingly, no one invited me to join their group. Quite stupid, right? Lucas's group was among the first to enter the dungeon. Before stepping through the portal, he shot me a glance. "And you, what are you doing here?" An unfamiliar voice reached my ears, causing me to turn my head to the right. There stood a beautiful woman with tan skin and black hair, her menacing green eyes fixed on me. 2 swords hung at her waist, and that was enough for me to know her identity.
Ah, goddammit.
It was Ziva, the absolutely crazy instructor.
Fucking hell.
MHM? She raised an eyebrow in surprise.
Fuck.
Did I say that out loud? Aren't you entering the portal? She asked casually, her hands resting on her hips near her sword, her head tilted slightly. I knew avoiding this conversation was impossible, so after a bit of hesitation, I answered. Not really. She tilted her head even more, a curious glint in her eyes. May I ask why? My eyes narrowed at her words. Do you have to be so curious about everything? My mana evaluation went great enough that I don't need to bother with this test. Her eyes widened in surprise at my words.
Mana evaluation? How come? She muttered to herself.
I closed my eyes and let out a deep sigh, ignoring her. I was thinking about how to spend my time before the next exam. But suddenly, my instincts kicked in. Clang. TSSHHHH. Before I knew it, I was sent sliding back a few meters as I barely managed to block her sudden strike. As I thought so, she uttered with a thoughtful expression. She had her sword drawn now, pointing it directly at me with a smirk creeping onto her face. How could a strong swordsman like you take the mana evaluation instead of the aura evaluation? Her lips curled into a wicked smile.
Oh, hell no. Not this.
Anything but this. Interesting, she said with a strange gleam in her green eyes. And before I could react, she was already charging toward me.
Fuck.
Lucas's POV. Iris, did you register the remaining monsters? Yeah, looks like they're a variant of the lizard species, Iris replied softly, looking at the device in her hands.
MHM. Great, I nodded, feeling a little more at ease.
Everything seemed to be going smoothly so far. We'd run into a few unusual monsters, but nothing that really posed a threat. Up until now, they'd all either been variations of lizards or snakes, nothing too strange. The dungeon itself, though, was another story. The entire place felt off. The air was thick with humidity, and water droplets constantly splashed down from the shimmering crystals in the ceiling. It was definitely an unknown dungeon. None of these monsters were familiar to me, or to anyone in the group for that matter. Guys, look! Maya suddenly shouted, pointing excitedly ahead. Our attention snapped to the spot she was pointing at, a small lake in the distance, its water sparkling under the light. Rose immediately rushed over, her curiosity piqued and knelt beside the water to dip her fingers in. It's potable water, strange, she spoke.
Potable water?
I asked, walking up beside her. I scooped up a handful of the water and brought it to my lips. It really is, I said in surprise, tasting the fresh, clean water. I had a pretty high resistance to poison, so I wasn't worried about it being tainted or even poisoned, but still, this was unexpected.
I know.
Maya jumped in, grinning. Let's take a bath.
A bath?
Even Ella seemed to be seriously considering it. However, soon their gazes shifted to me, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I'll continue exploring. I quickly added, raising my hands defensively as I backed away. Before they could say anything more, I casually took a few steps back. But as soon as I was a few meters away, I felt a barrier spring up around the lake. These girls? I sighed with a deep smile. If only I could take a small peek.
Heh. No. Control yourself.
I muttered to myself, tapping my cheek twice to knock myself out of those thoughts. I should take a look around. I started walking around the area, making sure there was no one around to disturb their bath time. I looked around for anything else of interest, and sure enough, I spotted something in the distance. Oh, one of those lizard monsters. There, a small group of green creatures, each holding a spear and wearing light armor, were coming towards me. They had that same ugly reptilian look, and their green eyes locked onto mine immediately.
Gwish.
The group roared loudly as they started running toward me, their spears prepared to strike. Each step they took made a quack sound on the wet floor due to their scales.
And so, rumble.
Lightning series, lightning bolt. Second level spell. Gwaff. They died in a single strike. Despite being B-rank monsters, they were surprisingly weak against lightning. I had tested this before, but at first, it was just a stroke of luck. Now, however, I'm completely certain of it. So, I entered the information into the device, noting that those lizard species were weak against lightning, along with a brief description that Iris had forgotten to include. Great. If we keep going like this, we should be able to get the perfect score.
But then, my thoughts drifted.
I'm just not entirely sure about Estria though. As I walked through the portal, I glanced over at him. Estria looked completely uninterested in the whole thing. He was just sitting off to the side, looking bored, almost as if he didn't care about the test at all. The shock of his mana quality being revealed was immense. I never expected him to possess such a strong mana quality. Even Rose looked as if her jaw might drop to the floor when the results were announced.
God, it was so funny.
Well, everything is fine for now, so let's keep it that way, I thought. However, at that very moment, I felt my heart sink. This feeling, it's so familiar. Whenever this sensation occurred, something terrible was always about to happen.
Boom.
The dungeon began to crumble. Debris fell to the ground, dust swirled around, and rocks shattered as they dropped. Shit, is this really happening right now?
A dungeon upgrade. That means
the other students are in danger. I need to act quickly.
Lucas.
As I retraced my steps through the dungeon, a familiar voice called out. Turning my head, I saw Ella and the rest of the group rushing toward me. What's going on? Iris asked, squeezing water out of her hair, droplets streaming down her arms. It looks like this dungeon is a red dungeon, Ella answered before I could speak. Iris's brows furrowed. So, does that mean it's going to rank up to A+? Most likely, Rose nodded thoughtfully. I glanced back toward the path we had taken. We can't waste time standing around. Some of our classmates are too weak to handle an A+ dungeon, even in groups. We need to find them before something happens. Iris nodded, already moving, as she replied to my words. If I remember correctly, some of them went down that passage. We didn't say anything and instead followed her, quickening our pace. It didn't take long to reach our destination, but as soon as we arrived, our gazes sank almost immediately.
Aak.
Scattered across the ground were the mutilated remains of several students. Blood painted the floor and walls, and standing in the center of the carnage was a strange purple creature. It had a strange appearance. Its body was so thin you could see its bones despite having a slight amount of purple skin, and its terrifying black eyes that glowed sinisterly.
Gulp.
We all couldn't help but swallow hard when we saw it, but at the same time, we got into our fighting positions, ready to attack at any moment. Grag. The creature growled softly, and at that moment, I exchanged glances with Ella before she dashed forward. Royal Swordsmanship, Heavenly Strike. SS-level swordsmanship. Ella's sword pulsed with a strong gold energy as she swung it downwards, in the direction of the strange purple creature. Crack. The creature's head snapped unnaturally to the side, its neck twisting like a broken doll. He extended his clawed hand as a strange small black void formed on it. Fwip. The golden energy was suddenly swallowed by the black void. Wah! Before she could finish her words, the creature's other arm lashed out like a whip, striking her squarely in the chest with a bone-breaking force. She was thrown across the cave until her back slammed against the cave walls. But I ignored that, knowing that Iris was going to heal her. During the time she was flying, I was already behind the creature. Demon-slaying sword art. Corrupted sword. Advanced level swordsmanship B+. Black flames engulfed my sword as I aimed for the creature's head. Just like before, it formed a black void in its hand, But this time, my flames weren't so easily extinguished. Guraf. The creature let out a strange noise as the black flames devoured the void and started crawling across its body. Die, you fucking bastard.
Clang. Ha.
My blade struck its flesh, or what I thought was flesh, but the sound was like metal clashing against metal.
What the hell?
I muttered, pulling back slightly. The creature's body was unnaturally tough. However, at that point, my black flames had already crawled to its body and were slowly burning him. Is it dead? Maya asked cautiously, tapping my shoulder. I kept my eyes on the creature. And moments later, its body crumbled to ash, leaving only scorched remains on the ground. Finally, Maya sighed in relief. That thing was tougher than it looked. And then we both turned to the rest of the group.
Ah. Maya hesitated, pointing toward the chaos.
I thought that thing was a mini-boss, she muttered. I nodded in agreement, but our attention snapped to Rose's urgent shout. Guys, what are you doing starting?
Fucking helps us.
Rose yelled, launching 2 fire spells at a horde of similar creatures swarming toward her. There were at least 20 of them.
Lucas.
Your flames are the only thing that works on them. Ella shouted, blocking an attack with her sword but visibly struggling. Quickly, do something.
Got it.
I tightened my grip on my blade, black flames reigniting along its edge. Then, I dashed towards the small horde of those strange creatures. Except that this time, I was going to use a wide-range attack. Demon-slaying sword art.
Devastation sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship, A. The black flames surged, condensing into a massive crescent-shaped wave as I swung my blade in a wide arc. The fiery slash tore through the air, heading straight for the horde. Immediately, Ella grabbed Iris and jumped away while Rose did the same thing as her.
Garaf.
The creatures let out a bunch of growls, their last cries echoing through the cave before they were engulfed by the black flames. Within moments, the entire horde crumbled to ashes, leaving nothing but silence and charred remains behind. Thank God your weird black flames actually work on these things, Ella sighed, brushing dirt off her battle suit as she caught her breath. Then she approached one of the bodies and took a sample of the ashes before coming to me and placing it in the device.
Beep.
It works. She smiled faintly. We all gazed at the device.
Void skeleton.
Type, undead/void species. Description, a creature made out of void, usually found in extremely rare A+ ranked dungeons. Typically serves as a subordinate to a higher ranked boss creature known as the Void Lich. Ah, so this kind of creature already exists, huh? Ella muttered, scrolling through the entry. Yeah, but void species are extremely rare. If we can just acquire the body of this skeleton, it should be valued highly, Rose said as she began to look around. Strangely, they don't have a core, she muttered in disappointment. Or did your flames reduce the core to ashes? Rose asked, raising an eyebrow as she looked at me.
No, that's not the case. I replied.
I had tested that theory, and nothing happened to the cores. Then these things just don't have any. Rose looked more frustrated than surprised. Then as Iris looked at the device, she opened her mouth with a thoughtful expression. If this dungeon really is void type, then the boss has to be the Void Lich, like the description just like the device indicates.
A Void Lich.
Maya's eyes immediately lit up.
That means a Lich Heart.
And not just any Lich Heart, a Void Lich Heart. Her excitement was palpable, but I quickly brought her back to reality with a light smack on the head.
Ouch.
She pouted, rubbing the spot before glaring at me. Iris chuckled at my actions before explaining. Maya, the chances of a Lich Heart dropping are less than 0.001%.
For a Void Lich?
It's probably even lower. Ugh, way to kill the mood, Maya pouted once again, crossing her arms with an annoyed face.
Guys.
Ella called out to us, covering her face as though she were looking at a group of clueless people. How are we supposed to deal with void magic?
Ah.
All of us emitted a surprised sound in unison. We had completely forgotten about that detail.
Clang.
Ziva's smirk deepened as she slowly lowered her sword to her side, the tip barely grazing the ground. Her green eyes sparkled with a strange delight as she studied me like a cat playing with its mouse. Don't use mana, she declared, pointing her sword at me.
Or aura. Just swords. Pure skill.
Let's see how you measure up.
I didn't respond. What was the point?
If I refused, she'd only find some way to force me into it. Ziva wasn't the type to take no for an answer. My grip tightened around the hilt of my sword. This was going to be hell. Her grin widened as if she could read my thoughts.
Good. Let's begin. Before I could even take a stance, she was on me. Shing.
Her blade whistled through the air, moving faster than I had anticipated. I barely managed to sidestep, and her sword sliced clean through a strand of hair that had fallen into my face.
Damn it.
I cursed under my breath and quickly countered with a swift strike of my own.
Clang.
Our blades collided, the force of her block sending a jolt throughout both of my arms. She was strong, way stronger than me. Perhaps AS++ level strength, or more. Not bad, she mused, her voice almost teasing. But you're holding back. Come on, Estrella, entertain me. I gritted my teeth.
Entertain her?
She was crazy, absolutely insane. She lunged towards me again, and I parried barely, but she shifted her weight mid-strike, twisting her body like a dancer and driving her knee into my gut.
Thud.
I stumbled back, gasping for air. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me falter in pain.
Oh?
You're still standing. Ziva tilted her head, her grin never fading. If anything, it seemed to have widened even more.
Impressive.
Most people would be on the ground crying by now. You're fucking insane, I spat, wiping the blood from my lip.
And you're slow, she retorted, charging again. Clang. Clang. Clang.
Her strikes came in rapid succession, each one heavier than the last. I was forced to retreat, with every step a desperate attempt to find an opening to attack her.
But then, I saw it. A tiny misstep.
Her left foot was just slightly off balance. It was barely noticeable, but it was enough. I shifted my stance and swung low, aiming for her legs.
Shying.
To my shock, she jumped, flipping over my blade like it was child's play. She landed gracefully a few feet away, laughing. Smart move, she said, her green eyes wide with excitement. I didn't think you'd catch that. Fuck, did this woman make that error to see if I could see it simply? She's indeed fucking crazy.
I didn't need to be told twice.
This time, I went on the offensive, unleashing a flurry of strikes. She parried each one effortlessly, but I could tell I'd caught her off guard.
For a moment, she looked almost impressed. Clang. Clang. Shing.
Our blades danced, sparks flying with every clash. Sweat dripped down my face, mixing with the blood that now seeped from a cut on my cheek. My arms ached from the effort, but I couldn't stop.
Not now.
Not with her watching me like a hawk. You've got enough spirit, she said, blocking another strike with ease. But spirit won't win this fight alone.
Thwack.
She kicked me in the side, hard enough to send me sprawling. My sword slipped from my grasp, clattering to the ground a few feet away. Before I could recover, her blade was at my throat. Dead, she said simply, her grin widening.
Again. Ah huff.
I glared up at her, my breath coming out in ragged gasps. You're a fucking lunatic. And you're sloppy. She stepped back, lowering her sword. She didn't even care about me cursing at her.
Pick up your sword.
We're not done yet. I groaned, forcing myself to my feet. Blood trickled down my arm from a shallow cut, staining the hilt of my sword as I picked it up. This time, I didn't wait for her to make the first move. I charged, swinging with everything I had.
Clang.
She blocked me, but I didn't let up. I pressed forward, forcing her to take a step back.
Then another. And another.
For a moment, it felt like I might actually have the upper hand. But then she laughed, a low, unsettling sound that sent a chill down my spine. Oh, Estrella, she said, almost pityingly. You're trying so hard. Before I could react, she twisted her blade, disarming me with a flick of her wrist. My sword flew from my hand, embedding itself in the ground several feet away. And then she was on me again, her strikes faster and more brutal than before.
Shing. Clang. Thwack. I couldn't keep up.
Every block sent a shockwave through my arms, every hit driving me closer to the edge. Finally, I saw my chance. She overextended, just slightly, and I ducked under her swing, grabbing the hilt of her second sword.
She didn't see it coming.
I spun, slashing at her side.
She-ink.
Blood sprayed as my blade found its mark, slicing through her armor and into her flesh. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought that the fight would be over.
But then she laughed.
Not a normal laugh, a full-blown, unhinged cackle. That's more like it, she said, her voice filled with glee. Now we're having fun. Crazy bitch. She didn't even flinch as she retaliated, her movements faster and more vicious than before.
Clang. Shing.
The fight became a blur of steel and blood. I didn't know how long we fought, seconds, minutes, hours. All I knew was that I couldn't let her win. Finally, I saw it, a shimmering light in the corner of my eye.
The dungeon portal.
We had fought and now we were back to the beginning where we started it. But the portal was different. Instead of its usual blue color, it was red. Ziva saw it too. Her grin widened, and without a word, she began pushing me toward it.
Clang.
"You're not serious," I said through gritted teeth, blocking another strike. "Oh, I'm very serious," she replied, her voice dripping with anticipation. "What better place to finish this?" Before I could protest, she delivered a powerful blow that sent me flying backward.
Thud.
I hit the ground hard, the world spinning around me. When I looked up, I realized where I was.
Inside the portal.
Ziva stood over me, her sword at the ready and her green eyes blazing with excitement as a deep grin stretched in her face. Round 2. I groaned, dragging myself to my feet.
God damn it. I muttered. And then the portal closed. Ha!
I let out a tired breath, staring at the small camp we'd managed to set up. A few hours had passed, and at least we had found everyone.
Except Estria.
But someone like him wouldn't die that easily. Around me, there was a mess of injured students. Iris and the rest of the healing team were working their butts off, rushing from one person to the next, trying to keep up.
The wounds were bad. Really bad.
It wasn't like regular injuries. The skeletons we fought left more than just cuts and bruises. It was as if their magic had poisoned the wounds, making them hard to heal. I could see the exhaustion on Iris's face as she tried to heal someone whose leg had been nearly shattered, but it wasn't going well. The healing spells weren't working like they should, and that was probably due to their void attribute.
Lucas.
Have you thought of a plan yet? Maya's voice cut through my thoughts as she plopped down beside me.
I shook my head.
Not really. Void magic is tricky. It messes with everything. My voice came out a little more tense than I wanted it to.
Then hurry up.
Everyone's starving, and you know how slow the professors are to get here. Maya sounded frustrated, but I could tell she was trying to hide it. She always did that when she was worried.
I know.
I let out another sigh.
She was right.
We were running out of time, and everyone was on edge, not to mention, even I was starving. I couldn't think straight on an empty stomach, but we had no choice.
Shit.
I bit my lip. But then, I felt someone tapping my shoulder.
It was Ella.
I have a plan. She only said those words, and it was enough to warm up my worries. We quickly gathered all the students who were able to move, and Ella began explaining her plan. It was clear she had thought this through. We'd already located the boss room a while ago, so all that was left was to execute her plan. It wasn't complicated, which was probably why it made so much sense. Ella laid it out for everyone in the simplest way possible. First, we'd need to divide the group. The students who were healed and still able to fight would be split into smaller teams. Each team would have a specific role. Some would be in charge of distracting the Void Lich, while others would target its weaker spots. The goal wasn't to take it down completely just yet, more like wearing it down, keeping it busy while we figured out a way to finish it off. Then, we had the healing team, our healing squad, as I'd come to call them. They'd stay behind the fighters, ready to jump in when needed. Their job was to keep everyone patched up and ready for the next round, especially those on the front lines. If someone got injured or too tired, the healers would be there to back them up. It was a simple plan, but it gave us something to work with. We just had to move fast. We all set off towards the boss room, the sound of our footsteps echoing through the dark cave. The air was cold, unnaturally cold, as though something was watching us from the shadows. As we neared the entrance, I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The Void Lich was waiting for us. Ella motioned for everyone to spread out, and we formed up in our groups.
Then, we pushed the door open.
The Void Lich. It was as terrifying as it sounded. It stood tall, its bony body giving off an ominous energy that made the air feel strange. Its eyes were empty black holes that glowed eerily. Its robes were torn, and its sharp, claw-like hands oozed a dark mist. The air around it was cold and heavy, as if the life in the room was being sucked away by its very presence. "Stay focused, we have to stick to the plan,"
Ella warned us.
Everyone nodded, and we all got into position. Maya was already itching for a fight, her fists clenched, ready to charge. Rose stepped back, her hands shining with fire magic, and Iris positioned herself near the back, keeping an eye on us, ready to heal if anything went wrong. However, one thing that we didn't count was how terrifying the Lich's pressure was. The other students that were injured couldn't move their bodies at all. Ella's plan had just been wasted. Seeing this, Ella bit her lips, but she quickly made up a small plan just for us 5. On my count we move, Ella said, and we all tensed, waiting for her signal.
Go!
Ella shouted, and we charged. I was the first to move. Demon slaying sword art.
Corrupted sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship B+. My sword ignited with black flames as I rushed forward, aiming straight for the Void Lich. As I closed the distance, the Lich finally moved. It raised one of its bony hands and shot out a blast of void energy. The air around it warped and twisted as the magic flew toward me.
Shit!
I cursed, jumping to the side just in time. The blast exploded against the floor with a loud boom, sending chunks of stone flying in every direction. I barely dodged, feeling the heat from the blast on my back. Ella wasn't wasting any time. Heavenly strike, consecutive waves. SS level swordsmanship. She was already in the thick of it. Her sword enveloped with a bright golden glow moved in graceful arcs as she slashed at the Lich's limbs. Her strikes were fast, too fast for the Lich to block, but it didn't seem to feel anything. Clang! Each strike rang out against its dark armor, leaving no visible mark. Maya charged next, her body a blur of motion as she darted in and out of range, aiming for Lich's chest. Her fists glinted in the dim light, swinging at its armor with lightning speed. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal hitting bone echoed through the room as Maya's iron fists bounced off the Lich's form.
Damn it!
Maya cursed, spinning out of the way as the Lich swiped at her with one of its claws, the sharp nails making a sharp sound as they cut through the air. Next, it was Rose. Rain of fireballs. She stepped back, her hands glowing with fire magic. She flicked her fingers, and fireballs flew from her hands, aimed directly at the Lich's chest. The fire crackled and popped in the air before slamming into the Lich's dark form.
Boom!
The fire exploded on contact, lighting up the room for a split second. The Lich stumbled back, its form flickering slightly. It didn't seem to be hurt, but it definitely noticed the attack. Then, all of us felt a washing sensation over our bodies. I glanced back and saw Iris, her hands glowing as she cast healing spells and buffs to keep us in perfect shape. The Lich raised both hands and void energy swirled around it. The air grew heavy and suffocating, and I could feel my stomach twist. It was building up something. I could feel it. Get ready! Ella shouted, her voice cutting through the tension. It's going to attack.
BAM!
The Lich slammed its hands into the ground, causing the room to shake. A wave of void energy burst forth, cracking the ground under its force. The wave expanded, and I barely managed to roll out of the way, feeling the heat and pressure of the magic wash over me. Crack! The sound of the stone floor cracking beneath the force of the attack rang out. We need to hit its weak spots. Ella shouted, her sword glowing brightly as she moved in again. I nodded, knowing she was right. I gripped my sword tighter, making the black flames increase in size. Then as I increased the concentration of mana, I dashed forward once again. The Lich raised a hand and a black hole appeared in front of it, pulling in everything nearby. The air around it warped, and I felt the pull, like a vacuum, sucking at my body. Get back! Ella shouted, pushing me out of the way just as I almost got sucked into the hole. The others were scattered, doing their best to avoid the gravitational pull of the Lich's magic. Whoosh! The air seemed to twist as everything was sucked toward the void. I saw Maya trying to hold her ground, her body tensing as the pull tried to drag her in.
Fight it!
Rose yelled, flinging another fireball toward the Lich's chest.
Boom!
The fireball exploded on impact, but the Lich barely flinched. It's too strong. Maya shouted, her voice strained as she dug her feet into the ground. Iris was doing everything she could to heal us, but even her magic seemed to be struggling against the void. I can't keep up with this, she said, her face starting to pale from the effort.
Hold on.
Ella shouted, her voice carrying over the chaos. She was already making her way toward the Lich again, sword raised. I followed her, focusing all my energy on my sword. The black flames burned hotter than ever as I swung the blade at the Lich's chest.
Devastation sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship A. Slash. The sword connected with a sickening clang, but this time, something was different. The Lich staggered back, and I saw a crack appear in its chest. It was weak there, I could feel it. Now! Ella shouted, and we all attacked at once. Iris sent a healing spell to Maya, who charged in once more, her fists flashing with an intense blue aura as she struck at the crack in Lich's chest. Clang! Clang! Her irons hit, but they didn't penetrate.
The Lich was too tough. But we couldn't stop now. Boom!
The room shook again as the Lich roared, the force of its anger shaking the floor. A massive wave of void energy shot out from its body, expanding rapidly.
No.
Ella shouted loudly, hanging on her sword. Before we could react, the lich's black hole grew bigger, pulling everything into it.
Shit.
I yelled, trying to resist the pull, but it was too much. I could feel my feet leaving the ground, my body being dragged toward the void. The others were in the same situation. I saw Maya struggling, her fists clenched as she tried to resist the pull, but she couldn't. I snapped my attention toward the other students, my heart racing. There, standing in the middle of them, was Iris, surrounded by a brilliant golden barrier. Her face was twisted in concentration, teeth gritted, as she poured every ounce of mana she could muster into the barrier. It was a desperate move. She looked like she was barely holding on, her knees shaking, sweat streaming down her face. But even with all her strength, the barrier felt like it might crumble any second. It wasn't looking good at all.
Fuck.
I'll need to reveal my identity. There was no more time to waste. I gripped my sword tightly, my knuckles turning white as the ominous aura began to swirl around me, coating the blade in black flame.
Boom.
Everything around me shook violently. Debris flew in all directions, rocks and rubble crashing down from the ceiling, and the ground beneath us trembled as if it was going to split apart. A blinding flash of light filled my vision, making me shield my eyes instinctively. When the dust cleared and my vision returned, I froze. There, standing in the middle of the wreckage, was a figure I knew all too well.
Estria.
But something was wrong. "Stop it, you crazy bitch."
Clang.
Estria cursed loudly as he reflected the sword from
Our instructor Ziva? Come on, Estria.
"You're still hiding your power, I can feel it."
Clang. Clang. Clang.
The two of them moved like shadows, their swords clashing in a blur motion. It was almost as if they were teleporting, vanishing, and reappearing in a split second, their weapons flashing in the air, creating sparks with every hit. They were so focused on their fight that they didn't even notice us, not for a second.
But then it hit me.
The explosion had caught the Void Lich's attention, causing him to release his spell.
And somehow,
both of them had managed to save our lives.
Estria.
In the middle of his furious battle against Ziva, Estria froze. A voice rang out, pulling his attention away from the clash. He immediately leaped back, before looking around, and seeing everyone looking at them with confused expression. Then he turned to Lucas and saw a strange creature right in front of him. A Void Lich. So it's a Void-type dungeon, Har, Estria muttered, darting his eyes towards Ziva. Now she too had noticed the situation. But instead of jumping into the fight, Ziva merely raised her voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Consider this boss fight as part of my class. Whoever performs well enough will at least get a B-level grade." Her declaration rang out, and she casually stepped back from the fight, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. But as she turned away, she shot a glance at Estria. "We'll continue our fight later," she said, her smile widening mischievously as she winked at him. Estria clicked his tongue in response. "Crazy bitch," he muttered under his breath. But his attention quickly shifted back to the Void Lich, the creature looming menacingly before them. Judgment Eye, S-level skill. MHM. No weakness whatsoever. This kind of monster is really annoying. You can only defeat it with sheer strength. Estria crossed his arms in thought. He turned to look at the students. Even the ones who had been paralyzed by fear seemed to snap out of it the moment Ziva spoke. After all, in his perspective, now they could do their maximum because they knew that the professor would save them if they were in danger. And taking the chance, Ella shouted, "Let's realize our old plan." Immediately, the students moved. Groups formed, dividing the room into smaller teams. The healers stayed behind, and the fighters moved to the front, preparing for the battle. The groups split into two types of fighters, those who would distract the Void Lich, and those who would focus on dealing damage. "Rose!" Ella shouted, and suddenly, Estria felt the heat of the room increasing. Fire Series, Hell Volcano. 6th level spell. From the ground, massive currents of lava erupted, swirling like an inferno. It was like Mia's spell, but much stronger, more intense. Strangely, the currents of lava also divided the whole room into 3 parts, just enough for the 3 groups. It seemed like this was part of their plan. The first group, the ones tasked with distracting the Lich, began hurling spells at it. But the Void Lich's magic was too powerful. Its void aura absorbed the attacks, negating them without much effort. But then, the second group took advantage of the situation, attacking all at once, landing several blows on the Lich's exposed back. Groff. The Lich let out a strange growling sound, recoiling slightly as it swayed. In response, a small black ball began to form in the air, swirling with dark energy. Estria narrowed his eyes as he reached out to his sword, but then he realized that his help wasn't needed.
Devastation sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship, A. Die, you damned bastard. Shouting loudly, Lucas swung his sword, which was wreathed in black flames, at the void ball.
Shing.
His sword sliced through the small black orb, splitting it cleanly in half, and then Lucas twisted his body and spun, swinging his sword at the lich. Crack. But before the attack could fully connect with the lich, a void skeleton appeared in front of the creature, intercepting the blow and taking the hit. Then, the lich raised his staff, and a swarm of void skeletons began to appear around them.
Shit.
Lucas cursed under his breath. He quickly spun on his heel, leaping back just as Maya surged forward, just like they had planned before.
Corrupted sword.
Advanced level swordsmanship, B+. Lucas twisted his body, dealing with the skeletons that were now swarming around him. Meanwhile, Maya charged straight at the lich, her fists glowing with a blue aura. She threw a powerful punch directly at the lich's sturdy structure.
Clang.
The impact of Maya's punch sent a jolt up her arms, her teeth gritting from the force of the hit. But before she could throw another punch, the lich swung its massive arm at her. Maya quickly crossed her arms in an X shape, blocking the blow.
Puff.
Maya was sent flying toward the wall, crashing into it with a painful thud. But before she could hit the ground, Iris was there, jumping into the air and catching her.
Iris.
Maya groaned, but Iris was already healing her, casting a spell to mend her injuries. As the battle continued, the other students formed a tight circle around the Void Lich, their teamwork growing more synchronized by the minute. They dealt small bits of damage here and there, but their combined efforts were enough to keep the pressure on the Lich. But even if the battle was going well, some things weren't. Ella, I can't hold it anymore. Rose shouted as her mana reserves began to dwindle. She was almost at her limit and couldn't hold the spell anymore. Before Ella could respond, there was a sudden flash in front of Rose's eyes. A figure appeared, standing in front of her. A familiar white-haired boy.
Estria?
Rose stammered, looking at him in surprise. Estria smirked, positioning himself behind her in an instant. He wrapped his arms around her waist, making a small blush creep out to her face. Wah wah wah, what are you doing? Rose exploded, her voice rising as she started to fluster, her face starting to match the color of her red hair. Estria didn't say a word because he didn't need to. Rose immediately felt a warm surge of mana flowing into her, filling her to the brim with power. She immediately understood the reason behind Estria's actions. Estria was giving her his mana. The instant his mana infused her, the strength of her spell skyrocketed. Estria stood silently behind her, guiding her hands and helping her manipulate the lava currents. From the swirling lava, small fish made of lava began to form, swimming through the air toward the Void Lich. It passed a while and finally, when Rose could manipulate the spell alone, Estria slowly stepped back, releasing his hold on her. What's up with your shy expression? Estria teased with a grin, leaning in slightly. Did you fall in love? Rose's face turned even redder, her cold expression had completely melted under Estria's presence, in just a few minutes. She avoided his gaze, glancing down, too embarrassed to meet his eyes.
This.
I'm just kidding, relax a little. Estria chuckled, flashing her one last mischievous smile. But then, he leaned even closer than before, his lips just a few centimeters away from her left ear. Until later, cute redhead. Before she could say anything, Estria vanished from her sight. Rose, left standing there, blinked several times, trying to recover from the sudden rush of emotions. Her knees wobbled slightly, and she bit her lip in frustration. Bastard! She muttered under her breath, swatting at her face with her hand in an attempt to cool down while still manipulating the spell. On the other side, Estria smiled lightly.
That was fun. Clang.
Afterward, his gaze locked on the Void Lich as his eyes narrowed slightly.
Fwhip.
Suddenly, the entire room was bathed in a brilliant golden light, so bright it made everyone squint and instinctively step back, creating a little gap between them. Ella, glowing in that intense light, stepped forward, gripping the handle of her sword tightly. Royal swordsmanship, heaven's punishment. SS-level swordsmanship. The golden light flared to life, almost blinding in its intensity. As she leaped high into the air, her sword expanded, becoming a massive beam of radiant energy. She swung it horizontally, the golden light trailing behind, slicing through the air like a comet. With a force that shook the very air around them, her sword slammed down against the Void Lich. The air around it vibrated, humming with power.
Gluask.
The Void Lich lifted his staff just in time to try to block the blow. A huge black rectangular barrier formed above his head, crackling with dark energy as it clashed with Ella's strike.
Sheesh.
The sound of sparkles flying echoed loudly throughout the boss's room. At that moment, black flames erupted toward the ceiling, and Lucas, like a lightning bolt, dashed forward, making a piercing pose. Demon slaying sword art.
Piercing sword.
S-level swordsmanship. The temperature in the room skyrocketed, the heat from the flames intensifying as Lucas plunged the blade straight into the Void Lich's stomach.
Boom.
An explosion shook the entire room, sending a shockwave that knocked everyone back. The force of the blast was so powerful, the room was instantly shrouded in a thick cloud of smoke. Debris flew everywhere, bits of stone and rubble hitting the walls, the floor trembling beneath their feet. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in time.
No one moved. No one spoke.
Only the sound of the debris falling into the ground remained. And then, from the smoke, two figures stepped out.
Ella and Lucas. Yeah.
Let's go.
We did it.
The students, who had been holding their breath, erupted into cheers, their voices filling the room with pure joy. They clapped and shouted, the tension from the fight finally melting away. As the smoke began to clear, they saw the lifeless remains of the Void Lich on the ground.
Ah, we really did it.
Ella let out a long breath, her body sagging slightly. Yeah, we did, but I think I just burned through all my mana with that last hit. Lucas, panting heavily, couldn't help but smile.
I'm stoned.
Ella declared, limping towards the rest of the group. Immediately, Maya, who had been waiting anxiously, rushed over to them, her eyes wide with excitement.
So?
Did it drop the Lich heart? She asked, practically bouncing with energy, grabbing Lucas's hands.
No.
Maya's face instantly fell, the excitement vanishing in an instant.
Ah.
She groaned, her shoulders slumping. Behind her, Iris chuckled as she added. Don't worry, Maya, she said with a playful grin. I'll take you to that restaurant as a reward for your hard work.
Yay.
Maya jumped very high, making some kind of winning position, with her fist in the air. The group only chuckled at her actions. With the battle over, the students started heading toward the newly appeared exit gate. They'd earned their victory, and now it was time to leave. But as the last of the students stepped through the gate, Estria, under Ziva's, approached the dead body of the Void Lich. Hey, wake up, you bastard. I know that you're still alive. He kicked its bones. Seeing this, Ziva's smile only seemed to have widened as another good aspect of Estria had been noted in her head. Creak. As soon as Estria spoke those words, the bones of the Void Lich began to tremble. The skeleton shifted, and then, crack, it reformed into a smaller, incomplete figure, its skull missing entirely. The Void Lich had a very hidden ability. Resurrection from the dead, or in other words, it had two lives. And apparently, the other students seemed to have forgotten that, but Estria didn't. However, after being revived, the Void Lich were much weaker than before, and it would take years before they could truly regain their true strength. Estria's hand pressed against the Lich's brittle ribcage, the bones cold and fragile under his touch. So, tell me. His eyes began to glow in a deep, unsettling red. The Lich shuddered violently, its form quivering as if trying to escape her grip. What kind of curse did you put on the students? The Lich's skeletal body trembled, its empty eye sockets shaking in terror. The air around them grew thick, heavy with an unnatural chill, as if the very room itself feared Estria's cold voice. The bones creaked, the Lich's spirit trapped and trembling under his gaze. Crack! Estria let out a soft grunt as he glanced down at the trembling remains of the Void Lich. A curse that consumes mana, huh? Estria muttered, looking down on the quivering remnants of the Void Lich. He brushed his fingers against its ribcage as if teasing the skeleton, and then, a cold whisper flew from his mouth. Perish. Swoop. Mana began to gather in Estria's palm, swirling in a concentrated ball as he gently pressed it against the skeleton's ribs. Crack. The moment his hand made contact, the bones cracked again, shattering into thousands of tiny pieces. And just as the last fragments shattered, a faint trickle of void energy slipped from the wreckage. Estria wasted no time. He summoned a small ball of high-density mana, trapping the tiny stream of void energy inside it. This should be enough, he spoke calmly as he nodded to himself before turning away. Ziva appeared at his side, eyes wide with curiosity. She didn't waste a second. What do you need void energy for? She asked with an excited tone. Hey, come on, tell me. She urged, a playful grin on her face. Come on, don't be shy. But despite her consecutive questions, Estria ignored her completely as he stepped through the exit gate, emerging back into the academy's plaza.
Ah, Estrella.
A familiar voice called out, and Estrella turned to see Lucas striding toward him, a mischievous smile splattered on his face. Before Estrella could say anything, Lucas threw an arm over his shoulder with a grin. Do you perhaps like Rose?
Ha.
Estrella blinked as his eyebrows furrowed slightly.
What do you mean? He asked straight away.
Hee, Lucas grinned slightly, before leaning closer and then whispering to Estrella, don't think I didn't see you wrapping your hands over her waist.
Ah, that.
Since Lucas had seen his actions, Estrella sighed softly, then gave a faint, almost teasing smile to him.
Mayhaps.
Lucas just grinned at his words. He withdrew his arm and extended his hand. All right, I didn't really get a chance to introduce myself properly.
I'm Lucas Heartstone.
I hope we get along well. Looking at his stretched hand, Estrella smiled lightly, before shooking it. The name's Estrella Moon. Shaking his hands, Lucas couldn't help but frown as Estrella mentioned his name. It wasn't a noble name or even a known name for commoners. However, looking at the small panel in front of him, Lucas kept a small smile on his lips. Main quest number 7. Make Estrella ## s favorability reach 50 points. A current favorability, 23 up. Kill more than 200 middle-ranking demon beasts.
Completed.
Kill more than 50 high-ranking demon beasts.
Completed.
Kill a single named demon beast.
Completed.
Stop the awakening of one of the 7 demon generals. Time remaining, 16 days, 22 hours, 17 minutes and 32 seconds.
Rewards?
Lucas had no idea why the system insisted on increasing Estrella's favorability, but it was clear he had to do it nonetheless. However, the last part of the quest, stopping one of the 7 demon generals, was probably the real reason Estrella's favorability needed to rise. With his strength, Estrella would be a huge help for him.
Flick.
At that moment, the headmistress, Eleonora, snapped her fingers, catching everyone's attention. She smiled warmly as she addressed the students in the plaza.
All right. Great job, everyone.
Your results from today's dungeon test are much better than I expected, Eleonora said, her eyes twinkling with pride. I'll be announcing the results now, from the lowest to the best. She smiled as her gaze swept through the students. A small sheet of paper appeared in her hand, and she scanned it briefly before continuing.
First up.
Violet didn't participate due to her duties as student council president, so her grade will be postponed. The crowd shifted a little, waiting for the next announcement.
So, we have
Adrian's group, rating, B-. Eleonora announced, her eyes scanning Adrian's team. You all did a fantastic job healing the injured and supporting your teammates while battling the void skeletons.
Well done.
Hearing their grade, everyone cheered up because it meant that the lowest grade was B-, so they all had excellent grades.
Then,
Marcus's group. Rating, B-. She continued. Just like Adrian's group, your teamwork was excellent, and you all did well keeping the void skeletons distracted while others dealt damage. The students in Marcus's group high-fived each other, proud of their performance. Now, Evan's group. Rating, B+. Eleonora said, nodding at Evan's team. You all worked very well together, having great team chemistry, especially when you all managed to grab the Void Lich's attention. Not to mention, you took down quite a huge amount of monsters before the dungeon turned red. Let's go. Unlike the other groups, Evan's group started cheering loudly to themselves, full of enthusiasm and excitement due to their high grade. Now for Ella's group. Rating, A+. Eleonora smiled, a proud glint in her eyes. You all wiped out a ton of monsters, and when the dungeon turned red, you led the other students to victory. Special shout out to Ella and Lucas for delivering the final blow to the Void Lich, Iris for her amazing healing, and Maya for her heavy damage output. Great job everyone. She started clapping, and so did the other students. Ella and Lucas exchanged a quick, knowing look, while Iris tried to calm Maya, who was jumping with excitement. And finally, she continued, and everyone's eyes suddenly widened. They had thought that Ella's group had gotten the best grade, but it seemed that they didn't. Estrella alone, rating. She paused, looking directly at Estrella who was leaning against a marble-made pillar. Everyone's gaze had turned to him. Rating, S perfect marks, she declared, her lips curving into a faint smile. Immediately, everyone exchanged glances and hurriedly turned to the headmistress, trying to get the reason why Estrella was the one who got perfect marks. Alone, the student Estrella gave Rose's mana reserves, and dealt invisible damages to the Void Lich so in the last moment, Lucas's sword could pierce through its stomach. Additionally, when everyone left the dungeon, Estria stayed, remembering the hidden ability of the Void Lich, which was the ability to resurrect. Along with that, the Void Lich had also placed a curse on every student, and Estria made sure to completely kill the Void Lich and also destroy the curse. Therefore, he's the only student that deserves perfect marks. As soon as she finished speaking, everyone turned their gazes toward Estria, and the looks on their faces completely changed to admiration. They were arrogant, yeah, but they knew that the only way to break a curse was to either use extremely expensive materials or kill its conjurer. But Estria had done it without asking for any credit, and instead acted alone, looking out for everyone. No wonder the classmates from his academy like him so much. Yeah, he seems like a scary guy, but inside he seems soft. And he doesn't want attention for anything he does. They all started seeing him in a new light. Slowly but surely, Estria's reputation within the academy was starting to change.
Estria.
A hand was placed on Estria's shoulder, and hearing that familiar voice, Estria's face twitched slightly. He slowly turned around, and Ziva's close face came into his view. "Let's fight," she declared, looking fiercely at him. She had already been quiet enough, letting the headmistress declare the student's grade, but now, she couldn't herself anymore. Estria had a monstrous talent, and just in a few hours of fighting against him, he had improved a ton, and now could even make her sweat. His fighting instinct had improved a lot just in that small amount of time.
"Another time," he replied.
But Ziva wasn't having it. "No, it has to be now." "Why?" He raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm thoroughly excited." Ziva spoke aloud as if it was the normal thing to do. Estria instantly froze up at her words. Phew! Seeing their interaction, the students that were a few meters away from them couldn't help but whistle at them, clearly making them seem like a couple. This bit.
"Come on."
Ziva grabbed Estria's arm, swinging it directly at the sky, sending him upwards. Then she jumped, unsheathed out her sword, and swung it directly at Estria's back. But before her sword could even make contact, flash! Estria vanished in the blink of an eye, disappearing from her line of sight entirely. Ha! Ziva's eyes darted around, looking in the direction that Estria had disappeared. Ugh! Suddenly, Estria found himself in a very different position. His head was now planted between the headmistress's breasts, and she was gently caressing his head with a soft smile on her face. "Not now, Ziva, I need to talk with this cute boy." She winked at Ziva before both of them vanished, leaving the students completely speechless and shocked by her actions towards Estria. They knew that Eleonora was a battle junkie and easily gets interested in someone with a huge potential. But this was different. The headmistress never acted like this, not in front of everyone. Immediately, the students started talking with each other, trying to figure out the reason why Eleonora acted that way towards Estria.
However, between them,
a white-haired lady clenched her fists tightly, her deep blue eyes trembling as they locked on the spot where Estria had just been.
"Why?"
Ella bit her lip in agony. She hadn't even realized until now, but Estria had always surrounded himself with female friends. Lots of them, really. There was Mia and Maria from his academy, whom Estria seemed to have a really close relationship with. Then there was Ziva, who, despite meeting Estria just a few hours ago, had already got attached to him, or more precisely, to his talent. But what if those feelings of pure admiration for his talent turned into something more? Ella couldn't really compete with someone as straightforward as Ziva. Not to mention that dating professors isn't something that the academy condemns. Well, Ziva was safe for now, even if her words proved otherwise. But even though there were these close friendships, none of them ever felt like that kind of relationship. None of them seemed to be something more than just friends. At least, that's how it had seemed, until today. But now, seeing Eleonora, the headmistress of all people, someone who was practically a legend in the academy, acting the way she did with Estria, something clicked inside her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing her grip on something she hadn't even realized she wanted. Ella knew that she liked Estria. No, she loved him. From the first moment, they met when she was weaker and Estria, in his hidden identity, saved her without breaking a sweat, to when they finally faced each other in the academy's competition. She already knew her true feelings towards him, but she didn't know how to deal with them. When she approached Estria, she could feel her cheeks flushing slightly, and just by hearing his voice, her knees would start wobbling. The truth is that he is her first ever love. Just after he saved her, she immediately spent her resources as a princess to discover his true identity. And when she did so, her eyes brightened in sheer happiness. So, she started to try and learn more about him. By learning what he likes to do, what is his favorite food, and things like that. The only problem for her was his friendship with Mia and Maria. But now, even more people were starting to notice him. And that feeling threatened her. She could feel a knot in her stomach, the jealousy creeping up even though she didn't want to admit it to herself. She was the first one to discover him, so why are other women starting to get interested in him after he truly revealed his power?
Why? Ella pondered.
She had gripped her fists so tightly that even blood seeped out of them. Ella, are you okay? Iris stuttered, frowning as she noticed Ella's darkened face.
I'm fine.
An extremely cold tone was blurted out as Ella turned her back to Iris. I'm going to my dorm, she added, walking away from them. Looking at her leaving back, Iris couldn't help but mumble to herself. What happened to her?